All right, everybody, I do believe we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov. First, apologies are in order. Benjamin Sklar, at this point, he is not currently here. He may be showing up a little bit later. There was a situation, but I really appreciate you guys tuning in. You're going to be in for a heck of a show today with Brian O'Shea, because Brian O'Shea, I guarantee you, he does not disappoint. He is also, by the way, a what do you call parachuter, going off the parachute. What is the official?
A former paratrooper in the military is an additional skill.
A former paratrooper. Ex-U.S. Special Forces intelligence. Although I don't think, just like a Playboy Playmate, I don't think there's ever such a thing as ex. I mean, you could tell me a little bit more information about that, Brian, as far as whether you're still being active as far as government duty calls.
No, that's just in the movies.
That's just in the movies. They're not going to call you back for like one last mission. But anyway,
there's some details, but yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into it, and we are going to be talking about Israel. Benji Sklar, hopefully he is going to be coming in a little bit later. We will see what the evening brings us. But anyway, we are going to be talking about what exactly it means that Israel has gone to war with Gaza, what it means for the rest of the world, whether this is going to be the real trigger for World War III versus Ukraine. So, Brian, let's get right into it. And for those who also don't know, Brian, you are a PI, private investigator as well, and you also run Daily Clout. And you are also the husband of the wonderful Naomi Wolf, who has been very groundbreaking in her coverage of a certain thing that I'm not going to mention right now, but you guys could probably guess what it is if I cannot mention it.
Let me just to clarify, she runs Daily Clout, and I run for her. But no, I'm a contributor at her company, Daily Clout, and yeah, she is doing amazing work across the spectrum.
Excellent. So, Brian, what exactly do you make of the current situation with Israel going to war? And is this actually going to trigger World War III? Is this going to be the thing that's going to bring us into the fray? Us, I mean, the United States.
Well, so there's a lot baked in there, but let me try to unpack it a little bit. That was a big question. First of all, I think if you would ask any Israeli in the Gaza Strip, they would think World War III has the worst has happened. It reminds me of some of the reactions remind me of after 9/11, when people said, hey, if we retaliate, they'll attack. I'm like, well, they already attacked. So, and they'll probably attack again if we don't do something to let them know it's, there's a price for everything you do. Because that's a different mentality that I think a lot of Westerners don't understand. By Westerners, I mean anyone who's not in that area. And hopefully Ben gets on because he could speak directly to that. But, there's a lot of people in the world, there's a lot of cultures in the world where they see diplomacy as weakness. They see the failure to counterstrike as an encouragement for them to strike again. And, I can't speak for Israelis, but I can say if it were me, I'd be doing the same thing. As far as go ahead.
Yep. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, as far as World War III, look, I honestly, I think there's people that want a World War III. Obviously they don't want a nuclear holocaust, but I mean, if you just look at let me just give you a broad overview of what I see is Ukraine didn't really work out marketing wise. Most Americans are against it, despite with CNN or the normal spokesmodels say, like, Jake Tapper and stuff like that. It's just too expensive. I mean, the economy is sucking. I think if we had a more robust economy, which we had 3 years ago, I think Americans would be like, okay. And I think a lot of the Americans that are in favor of it aren't really feeling that much pain yet from the economy, or they're trust fund babies who never feel the pain of the economy until there is no economy. But, I think I'm seeing upper middle class moms feeling this and law firms now feeling this. And it's just too much money. And anyway, so what I think happened there is like, okay, oh, look, there's a conflict in Israel. And I'm keeping myself from saying certain things like, but this guy did it or this guy. I don't want to get into that. But there's a conflict in Israel and Gaza in that area. And almost immediately, I went to the .gov websites and then looked for any PDFs. And you could see just immediately all sorts of kinetic warfare type of weapons contracts being awarded, including one to, I think it's Draco or something like some defense company that the Assistant Secretary of Defense just left. And so you hear when the pundits start saying, we got to attack Iran. When you hear CNN or Washington Post or New York Times saying what we need to do as a country, the best advice I can give people is do the opposite or don't do anything.
But would you say, just to be a bit of a devil's advocate here, which is my position anyway, so that's very fortunate, when we had the very beginning of World War II, we had a lot of Americans who thought, hey, you know what, America first, we had the Great Depression, we don't want to go through another World War I. Why do we care whatever's going on in Germany? Why do we care about Hitler, taking Czechoslovakia and then Poland? That's their business. America's always been about, not minding other, not minding what other people are doing. By the way, I do have an update that Benji can do 8:30 p.m. I don't know, Brian, how long you have, if you would be able to stick around or not.
He's a fellow dad.
Yeah.
He's a proud dad. He's got pictures of his little one all over the place. How can I bemoan him? I've been there. I've got two myself. They're tall now, but I get it. It's cool.
All right.
Totally wait for him.
Excellent. Well, great news, everybody.
He's a master of marketing because I'm so excited now to meet him. I was looking forward to it, but now all this anticipation, I'm like, it's what's going to happen.
And same thing with all of you guys who are watching Break the Rules right now. You guys are going to be in for a real treat. We are going to have a real legit IDF paratrooper here who is now a high-powered lawyer coming in. So before we get into that conversation, though, when he gets here, I want to talk about Ukraine, because you just said right now about Americans being reluctant and how the military-industrial complex tries to make this big commercial of it. And yeah, I do agree that a lot of it does look very, let's say, cheesy and very, I want to support the right thing kind of mentality, same thing that happened with COVID and so on and so forth. But that doesn't always mean that that's incorrect. There are certain times in histories when the assholes of the world, where people who you wouldn't like, sometimes end up saying things that actually do make sense, and then you have people who actually have integrity, like Rand Paul, for instance, who say something that's actually going to cause a worse situation. So in the case of America, let's say, and Europe in general, because Europe was sick of World War I, they didn't want to, attack Hitler or do any preemptive strike, even though they knew that Germany was arming. So the only thing that they did was they got Neville Chamberlain to come down there and sign that little piece of paper that says, okay, you can take Czechoslovakia, but that's it, and we're going to, honor this new friendship of peace. And guess what happened? Hitler ended up going forward and taking more and more and more territory until he was stopped. And that is the issue that I see going on with Ukraine right now, as well as possibly what's happening with China and Iran when it comes to Israel. But in terms of Ukraine, what would you say to that pre-World War II argument?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's easy. I think it's easy to compare any offensive action to the offensive action of another country. So, and let me think on the relationship there. But what I would say about Ukraine in general was, the question I would have for anyone is, if this was the big plan of Putin to, storm through Europe and threaten the democracy of the world, why did he wait till Biden got into office to do it? Or maybe that was the plan. Because why didn't it happen? Why has nothing happened on, since 2014? But then all of a sudden, and especially when everyone's rattling that saber on the side of the UN, and Kamala Harris stupidly saying, "Oh yeah, of course we'll get you NATO," and you can't put too much on her, but international politics. It's like, hey, she said it, and look, I think I'll never qualify my statements by saying I'm not saying he's this or this. I won't do that. I mean, people know how I feel, but what I will say is this: I just there's been aggression, there's been cross-border aggression. Sure, it's been happening since 2014. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not a. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to assist Ukraine. But what I'm saying is the amount of money that went into Ukraine already exceeds what's gone into Afghanistan. Okay. And I'll say this as well. How do you run out of bullets after about $100 billion? So to me, I think if it were any other, even Obama, maybe, if it were any other regime in the White House, yeah, I might be a little more patient. But this administration has literally lied about almost everything. And they wasted the lives, or pretty much wasted all the money and the effort that went into Afghanistan to just hand it over, and they handed it over to the Taliban. You don't just accidentally leave a motor pool full of new equipment, new Humvees, helicopter. That's bullshit. That was a gift, and I think that gift was instructed to be given to them by Xi Jinping, because almost immediately after Afghanistan fell, and I feel so bad for those Marines. I still have that image in my head of these poor guys standing on the conics in a sea of chaoticness going on, and those people on the ground, and that I've never seen anything like that in my life. And so when I see that, and then that same regime wants us to trust them with sending so much money to a country who, in my opinion, and you'll disagree with this, but in my opinion, has no strategic value for the United States.
So let's take this one step at a time.
I have a lot of Ukrainian friends. I will qualify that statement.
And I have a lot of Irish friends too. Shout out to the great Uber Boyo, by the way. He's coming in next week on Break the Rules with Jason Researcher Johnny, and we're going to be talking about Play-Doh, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But regarding this thing, so a couple of things.
Number one, also Ivory Coast, yes, and Czech, just so you know.
Nice. So regarding Biden, I agree with you. I would say even more so, there are people who are Ukrainian who think that what he's been doing has been like this drip, drip, drip effect, that maybe some people end up making money from that by elongating what could have actually been very different if he would have sent aircrafts, if he would have sent things that actually would have had a strategic advantage to the Ukrainian people, rather than this drip, drip, drip thing. So far, as far as budget-wise, it's very weird, this whole thing about the running out of bullets for me, because number one, we have only, in terms of the calculations that have been given, spent no more than 6% of the U.S. defense budget. At least that's the statistics that I got. Is that wrong?
It's not incorrect. Look, nothing they say is wrong. But that is such. I mean, that respectfully, that's a talking point I've heard a dozen times. And you hear that when I hear it on CNN, MSNBC. But when you look at the defense budget that they're quoting, they're talking about the entire defense budget. And that defense budget includes installation, federal installations, training, family programs, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time that people are like, oh, it's only this much of the budget. If you just go into the, whitehouse.gov and you look at the, in the press room under presidential actions, you can see them shifting money from training and doctrine of our military to make room to give that money to another country. Meanwhile, our own country, we're talking about a containment war, right? And by the way, I come in hot. It doesn't mean I'm mad. I'm just Irish. But this is still a debate, even, a good show needs some good passion. But I feel this way, but it's not directed at you. But the thing is, we're talking about a containment war. I mean, that's how they sold this, right? If Ukraine falls, and democracy will fall. That is a containment war. That is actually a classic Cold War style war. Okay, great. All right. But if you want to contain something, What about our own border? I mean, why are we sending FPS, Federal Protective Service, highly trained, multi-state federal police who are in charge of protecting our own federal infrastructure, are down on the border, according to the press conference they just had the other day, and they're driving illegal aliens back and forth to their medical appointments so that way the border patrol can sit on the border. Like, what the hell is going on? Why are we sending? I mean, I have an answer, I have a theory, but why are we sending so much to Ukraine where, we like to talk about protecting Taiwan, but it seems like we don't really want to. I think, past administrations did. This one doesn't seem to want to. And, on top of it, it's like, Israel's an actual ally with, we have a relationship with Israel that's gone back and forth, and they have routinely, they've routinely had our back in many, many things, especially being able to operate as I did, in the Middle East and North Africa. So my thing is like, and again, the initial helps out, that's fine. I would even be fine with it if the entire EU matched us, but they're the ones whining about being scared of Putin, yet they put in a pittance compared to what we put in.
Well, that's the problem right now, right? Because what they've been putting in has not been that high because they're so scared of Putin, and some of them, like Viktor Orban, for instance, depends on Putin's energy for the economy. No, well, why he doesn't?
If they're so scared of Putin, why are they number one customers for his gas?
Because they're scared of him. Because they're scared of him. That's the whole point. They're scared of him, so they do business with him. If they weren't scared of him, then they figure out a way not to depend on the bastard. But to what you were saying about the migration...
They were trying to. I could get into that.
But okay, so when it comes to the migration, I completely agree with you, but I don't look at it as being, well, you can only do one and cannot do the other, because frankly speaking, I don't think we have a choice in this matter. Because my whole thing about this conflict, this war, has been, okay, let's say we don't support Ukraine, or let's say like we stop our support right now, what's going to happen after that? And the problem is that countries like Finland, for example, have already been preparing their defenses. And as far as the rhetoric that's been coming out of the Russian government, Putin has said that Poland must be reminded that its Western territories are a gift from Stalin. And former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev claimed that the Baltic countries also belong to Russia. And he referred to Poland as being, quote, temporarily occupied, talking about like the NATO presence there. And then you also had Russian Colonel General Andrei Morduchiev, who also confirmed the ambitions of Russia, saying in an interview that, quote, this war will last for a long time because we still need to liberate Eastern Europe. So there we have it from the horse's mouth, what exactly these people have in mind. So my question to you is, okay, I agree with you about the border. I'm sure a lot of people do. What do we do if we're not going to help Ukraine, not even in terms of containment, but ideally in terms of getting rid of the Russian government? If we don't do that, if the Russian government keeps going into Ukraine, takes Ukraine, keeps going forward, wouldn't, number one, it get even more expensive for us eventually when we decide to do something about it? Or are we going to isolate ourselves so much that we're going to let this World War III occur, let Russia start acquiring Poland with the help of China, possibly taking even more countries? Like, where exactly are we going to draw the line here?
Well, I don't know. I think the fact that we have troops currently in Georgia, along with special forces contractors, we have stuff deployed to the Black Sea. We've given over $100 billion. We still have bases in Vicenza. We still have bases in Germany. We still have bases in England. We have bases all around there. So I don't think isolated is quite the profile I'd describe us as.
So if it's not isolating, then it's going to be more expensive. That's what's going to be happening.
Here's the thing. Like, first of all, and we disagree on this too, but I've done the math. Okay. And I think you need like 5 to 10 hectares for every one soldier if you're going to occupy a territory. They just don't have enough troops, even if they used all their cooks. They couldn't get much past Poland. But at the same time, so I don't really see how Russia can, be a threat to democracy. And let's face the facts. Russia is a big gas station with big guns. They'd rather make money than go to war. But I think the part I won't say you're forgetting, but what I would say is what a lot of people don't think about is Russia doesn't seem to make a move without China's permission. Okay, and we know they've had treaties for years, long before this. All that nonsense on the news about like, oh, we're pushing them into their arms. Yeah, you could push them further into China's arms, but they've had treaties forever. They've always had treaties since the 80s. And so my thing is like they don't seem to make a move without China's permission. So I think we have to be careful about rattling the saber, about toppling, you know, an entire government who did not attack us. Okay, they have not attacked the United States of America at all. And so
I would completely disagree about that, because if we're talking even about the migrant crisis, if we're for example with the migrant crisis, a lot of those Syrian migrants, those were caused by Putin's interventions into Syria, where he applied what is called the Grozny model, which was used in his war against Chechnya, basically decimating entire cities and having the people there become migrants that then end up getting weaponized to use against the West. And one example is in Finland recently. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Wait, time out. Sorry to cut you off, but
yes.
How has he attacked us?
Through the Syrian migrants that are crossing over into not just Europe and the United States. Sure, China's attacked us, Russia's attacked us.
China's attacked us, Uganda's attacked us, Mexico's attacked us.
Sure.
Venezuela, Guatemala, I mean, the list goes on.
I don't think... But again, we're talking about these particular requirements of what does it count when the country attacks you or not. That the country is expanding into the Western sphere of influence means, okay, we're either going to sit on our asses with our hands tied behind our backs and wait until Russia's going to get strong enough, it's going to regroup, and then it's going to go into Poland. And now... China? Well, in that case, it's a little bit more complicated because, number one, we are way more dependent on these cheap, dumb Chinese goods for all the Americans that it's going to be way harder to excise that demon. As far as dealing with Russia, I think it is going to be a lot easier since right now we are already by proxy going against Russia by arming Ukraine. So again, going back to my original question, fine, let's say we don't do anything, what happens then? If you're saying, well, we have all these bases in Poland and Germany, okay, great. So basically what you're saying then is that we are going to have to pay way more than whatever percentage of our military budget is being paid for right now once Russia regroups and goes into these areas. What's the other choice?
Why, first of all, why are we defending Europe? I mean, seriously, why are we defending Europe?
I wish we didn't. I wish Europe had its shit together.
You know what I mean? But where are their armies?
You're right. You're right.
Bloody murder when Trump talked about leaving Germany, and even our left-wing press scream bloody. You cannot do that, you know. And it's like, and then, you know, like. I think the problem with Americans is kind of like the Titanic financially. It's such a big vessel. They don't know it hit an iceberg already. That iceberg was the Biden administration, or maybe even before that, you know. But the thing is, it's like it's sinking, and we need to patch it up really quickly because once it starts moving fast, it's going to sink faster and faster. So I don't think the average American is feeling the pain. But I will say this at this point, and I'll have to get you the citation, but what I heard was that right now, Ukraine has cost, on average, the American taxpayer $1,000 to $1,500 a year for additional for each taxpayer. Like that's like literally like every American wrote that check out and said, "Here, give this to Ukraine." Now, some people that's nothing. Some people that's something, but not painful. But you know, there's a lot of people in this country right now where that's rent.
No, I agree. And look, we had the Great Depression. I hate keeping on bringing up the pre-World War II times, but I think they are very apt for a comparison because people were, starving to death back then. Things were really, really horrible, and people were sick of World War I. So it's like, why would we go into another war? My whole point is that everything you're saying is correct. What other choice do we have? It always comes back to what other choice do we have, and I keep bringing up why exactly we don't really seem to have that much of a choice here if Russia's going to keep expanding outwards. Now, when you were talking about the Europe not being responsible and having its own military that's just as capable of doing this, I couldn't agree more. I think Europe, especially Western Europe, has been a bunch of these fancy schmancy wine sippers that have relied on Big Brother America to take care of all of its problems, and frankly, I'm sick of it. I thought Trump was absolutely right when he was talking about how that part of NATO needs to get its shit together, but unfortunately, we're not living in a world where we can press a button and have all the bad things go away, which is why facing what we're facing right now, we're not going to be able to turn Europe into like this mighty military force by snapping our fingers. So dealing with the things that we are, the cards that we're dealt right now, the only choice that I see here is us either resisting Putin right now or resisting him afterwards when he regroups, gets stronger, then starts going into Poland, at which point it's going to be way more expensive. I don't see any other choice right now.
What I see as a choice is get a actual leader in the White House and say, all right, everyone take a time out. Let's have a talk. I mean, let's not forget, people talk about Democrats, I'll just say it. And it's funny. I was always I'm an independent conservative voter is how I describe myself. I was always really either way, and because I've voted across the aisle many times. This administration has honestly just shoved me into a corner because it's honestly it reminds me of right now, and I'll get to your question, but the Biden administration and the way this country is run right now, it's kind of like this. There's a bunch of rowdy students who are all about 10. That's a good rowdy age, just old enough to be dangerous, kind of, or hurt if they punch you, but not kill you. But they're going crazy. And the substitute teacher has died and is slumped over on the desk. Okay. And the kids are just running rampant. And then all the administrators are in the hallway looking in, but no one will go in there because they're like, well, maybe he's not dead and maybe he's viable and maybe something good will happen. Meanwhile, the kids are setting the curtains on fire. And, and that's the world. The kids are the world. And, strong leadership is the person slumped over on the desk. And look, we need that guy from Stand and Deliver to come in with his megaphone and shove those kids in the corner, make everyone sit down, get rid of the body, and get the fires put out.
And you're talking, yes. Go on.
What's that?
No, go on.
So what I was going to say is that we talk about diplomacy, and everyone talks about again, it goes back to that question. If this was the big plan, okay, then you're opening the window for a lot of other questions. If the big plan was always for Putin to invade Ukraine and then the rest of the world, then you got to ask yourself, okay, did he wait for a weak president? And if that's the case, did he know a weak president was coming in? You know where I'm going. Maybe he had the luxury of knowing when a weak president would come in. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is, these things were not happening under our last president, Trump. They just were not happening because there was strength. And so the other thing I'll say is this, and you can see this in my Twitter feed, when I just think it's the timing is just wild to me because okay, all of a sudden the big cash cow machine Afghanistan goes away August 15th. By October, they even had, and there were a lot of rhinos or Republicans in name only they started rattling the saber about, we got to go protect Ukraine, and it's like, wait, what? And so that was October. And then what was that? I think by February, before anything even happened, I found several nonprofits and their websites already set up to help the victims of the Russian attack on Ukraine before it happened. And then there's another law firm named Arendt Fox LLP. I'm not making this up. Arendt Fox LLP was really rattling that saber before anything happened. And I got to get this thread out to you because it's wild. Because thank you, my friends on Twitter. There's a lot of people that just dive into every research. Oh my God, they connected this thing to wars all over the world. And the guy, one of the partners in the firm was at Fauci's wedding. I mean, it's all over the map. Has a Ukrainian wife from a rich Ukrainian family. And these things were all set up before anything happened. And then I just tweeted it out like, hey, dude, this guy that was with Aaron Fox, I was like, hey, why this, why this? And why are you pushing this so much when nothing's happening, and there could be some aggression, but there's always been aggression. And he just blocked me immediately, this pretty big guy, and back then I didn't really have any followers, and blocks me immediately. And then the whole firm blocked me. So I'm like, okay, well, now I'm interested. And then even watching it, and we can go back and look at these. And I remember watching it live, and all the pundits, or all the, like, even Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, who are all equally terrible. They're like, oh, I'm in Kiev, and as you can see and probably heard, there's a massive explosion behind me. And I'm looking at my wife, and I'm like, I didn't see anything. And then they were talking about these, and again, I'll have to get this all up for you. They're talking about all these towns getting, like, bombarded, right? So I'm like, okay, all right. So I go to Google and I put on the traffic overlay. There's no traffic jams. There's traffic, but there's no traffic jams. Now, what do you think happens when a city is getting bombarded? People are getting the hell out of it. Okay. And no traffic jams. And as a point of comparison, there were traffic jams leaving Afghanistan, in every direction. And so I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden, Google takes that capability away just for that area. I'm like, there's something really, really, I'm not saying it didn't happen. What I am saying is it almost seems like it was planned, and a couple people got the schedule a bit wrong, and then they finally lined up.
Wait, but would that mean that Putin himself was complicit in the planning of this with the Ukrainian leadership? Like, at a certain point, you'd have to attribute some agency to the bad guy to do things that a bad guy does. But if we're talking, no, because this is like way other level than anything else. Because what that would mean is that Putin is in on it, and Zelensky is in on it, and everybody's in on it, and it's all just like orchestrated.
Before you go really far with that, just so it doesn't become a soundbite, I'm not saying that. You said that, but I'm saying, well, who knows? Okay, but you said that.
Who knows? Who knows? Awfully convenient.
Again,
who knows?
Again, these days when you got UFOs below the fold on page 4, anything's possible. Like, who knows what to believe anymore? So unless you're there.
In order for our minds not to get completely cracked, we have to have a certain amount of grounding to something in this world, because I completely agree with you about the UFOs and all of that. I can only make a choice in this reality based on the things that are in front of me. If somebody's attacking me who's high on bath salts, I have to defend myself. I'm not going to start thinking about whether this person on bath salts is actually like in league with like somebody who I knew from years ago who has like planned all this out. You know what I mean? So as far as the reactions that my friends have had when they were in Ukraine, for example, Vladislav Davidson, who appears often on Break the Rules with Curtis Yarvin. Guys, definitely check those streams out when you have a chance later on. He was in there, he was fired upon and all that. And we also have other friends, other people that we really trust who were in Kiev and who were experienced like this bombing and all of that. So that's why, as far as what happens like behind the scenes, like several layers deep, there's no way that I could say. I can only work with what I have right now. Because look, ultimately, we could say that our entire reality is not of our choice, and we are all piloted by God, like by the various branches of God, and we have no free will. Like we could go all the way there, but at this point, it doesn't really add anything to, well, what do we do about it? Because at that point, you could just crawl up into a ball in your shower and, think, well, there's nothing that I can do. But unfortunately, we have to play the game, which is life, where we have to react to what seems like the likeliest thing that's going to occur, which, as I said before, is if Russia, just like the social justice warrior leftists, if these entities are not opposed in any way, they'll keep going until they are opposed. And you know this with the leftists, right? Like, if you give them any kind of...
Where you force a truce like Donald Trump wants to do, and you say, and look, I'm not campaigning for Donald Trump. Screw it. Yeah, I guess I am, because honestly, like, he's the only person I want to see in the White House in the next 4 years. There, I said it. It's out. It's official. But for no other reason, because he's the only one that I think has, the backbone and the experience to really at a minimum, just pull the emergency switch and shut everything down first, just so everyone can like figure things out. Like you said it earlier, the way things, it's like catastrophe after catastrophe, and it's like there's so much going on. I mean, look at the bills to support Israel. There's 15 other conflicts rolled into those, and a couple social issues. Like just pull the plug. It's like pulling the when they have the pressure rooms and they pull it and it like just shuts everything down and fills with the baking soda and puts out the
Sure.
fire. We just need to do that right now.
Well,
Because
let's expand on that. Let's plan it out.
wait,
So
let me
go
finish,
for it.
because
Go for it.
I've done like I've been running. So if I lose my thought, I won't get it back because
Go for it.
I'm on fumes. But what I will say is this is like the one thing we can do. Well, Joe Biden can't do it because I don't even think Joe Biden knows his name is Joe Biden. But the one thing we can do is, if we have a strong president, is say, hey, you know what? Ukraine, stop. Russia, stop. Russia, we're your third largest fuel customer in the world. We're going to stop that and open up our own pipes if you don't agree to go to this truce. And Zelensky, where your bread is buttered. So you're both going to this truce. We're going to see if we can figure this out, instead of, before that can even happen, having an idiot like Joe Biden say a guy's a murderer and he's all this. And you talk about isolation. We've never been so isolated because of one president's actions. That's the thing. People talk smack about like a lot of the other presidents. We've never been this isolated. We are isolated from Saudi Arabia, who's now talking with China to change from a petrodollar to a petro yuan because that moron decided to call him a murderer, and then he turns around and calls Putin a murderer. Like, he throws that word around like it's nobody's business. And look what's happening. No one trusts us anymore. People might not have liked us before, but they certainly trusted our strength. No one's even scared of us these days.
Well, that is kind of the inverse of the madman strategy, where it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, you're a murderer, but there's not really anything that would back up reacting to a murderer like you would react to a murderer. In the case of...
That's a great point.
Like, there's not going to be that element of fear. But if we break it down, what happens when Trump gets in there and tells Putin, stop doing this because of A, B, and C? I still don't think that Putin is going to necessarily, like, what would make Putin stop? Let's just like list all the reasons down here. Why would Putin stop? Or also, why wouldn't Putin just pretend to stop, say, okay, Trump, you win, I'm going to stop. Meanwhile, he's going to do what Nazi Germany did when they start stockpiling, more weaponry and more troops and training and all that, and just waiting for the right opportunity to strike again.
Let me see what would make Russia stop. Probably if you seized all their gas stations that are jointly owned throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, jointly owned with the French, and then you say, hey, tell your buddies to stop. I mean, that would help. Or you could just do what Clinton did when the Chinese were showing aggression to us, and just completely level their embassy. I don't recommend that, but let's not forget, Bill Clinton leveled the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, and you cannot tell me it was an accident. And do you remember that?
I was too young. So what exactly went on there? Yeah.
And it's not a gotcha. Certainly not. And it is a piece of, well, it was something a Democratic president did. So, it's eventually going to be washed from the record. But no, that happened. And, so there was a lot going on. There was a crew of AWACS airmen that were being held by the Chinese. And, to his credit, only Bill Clinton could sell that one. I mean, that guy, his nickname was Slick Willie for a reason, because, all of a sudden in the middle of everything that's going on in Serbia, we did a precision strike on the Chinese embassy, and not, with barely any damage to the buildings around it. And Bill sells it like, listen to how he sells it. He goes, well, we talked to the pilots, and turns out they had old maps, and so these things they do happen. Old maps, state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar aircraft are up there breaking out their like AAA triptychs. Are you kidding me? But he sold it. That's the thing. So there's a lot you can do, and I think people forget that. Like, there's huge shows of strength that happen all the time that people don't even know about. So like when Iran was fueling it up and they were razzing it up, Xi Jinping was in Mar-a-Lago, for a state dinner or whatever, and he was backing, and everyone knows that China backs Iran quite a bit, and he was backing a lot of the terrorist attacks that are happening against our troops in Iraq. And so I have it from a good source. I can't say this is exactly what was said, but there's a famous picture of Xi Jinping getting his hand shaken by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump kind of, in my opinion, looks like he's squeezing it. They don't look comfortable. They're doing this whole, I hate you. And apparently what happened at that dinner is, and again, can't confirm the source, can't even give the source, but it's a good story if it's not true. But what I heard was that he said, oh, hey, gee, I got the I can't do Donald Trump, but he's like, yeah, I got that dark chocolate cake you like with the dehydrated raspberry powder that you were talking about. Yes, I really hope you enjoy it. Oh yeah, and I just bombed your buddy over there in Iraq, and so he's no more that general from Iran, and I'm taking out your Syrian bases as well. So hope you enjoy your cake.
Now here's a problem with that I could say outright at this moment. Qasem Soleimani was the most liberal of all those Iranian generals. Giorgiani confirmed this on the last stream. Trump really screwed the pooch by taking that guy out. He could have taken anybody else. That would have been fine. He took the one dude that actually had a chance of liberalizing Iran, which to me says, okay, you have a big stick, but you don't really know who to hit it with properly.
Dude, he was illegally in Iraq there, and he'd been running operations. He was in enemy territory. Like, you're telling me he could have solved things? He's there to be like, negotiate
in the long term, because right now the situation in Iran is that, as far as our last conversation with Giorgiani goes, around 7 out of 10 people want the regime gone, and a lot of these are young people. Iran has a very young population there. The one thing he said that America should not do and Israel should not do is attack their nuclear stockpiles, because he says that as far as energy goes. No, well, hold on. I got to finish here. Because the Iranians are very proud of their nuclear energy. And I don't mean stockpiles in weapon. I mean, like, in general, like all their nuclear stuff. That is something that they are very proud of having achieved. But as far as invading Iran goes, you may find this kind of weird, and we'll talk about this also.
I don't want to invade Iran. Don't get me wrong. I do not want that.
You do not, but as far as the conversation with Giorgiani, and who knows, maybe I can get the two of you guys together to kind of hash it out. Mm-hmm. His view was that instead of Israel going into Gaza, what Israel should have done is invade Iran. Because the Iranian people...
That's ridiculous. That's a talking point. That's actually literally a Pentagon talking point right now, because that's the big moneymaker. And there's so many multi-billion-dollar contracts that are dependent on that very invasion happening.
Quick question.
Like that would be...
Quick question. Does it necessarily mean that whatever people make money from is always going to be bad? Could it happen sometimes that there is something in this life where people who you don't like end up making money from it, yet it's still the right decision?
I was a defense contractor. I made money from it. I was doing good things, of course.
So as far as Iran, it's a very different situation than Iraq.
Wait. Can I clarify?
Sure.
So I know you heard me.
Sure.
And I know you're listening, but just so it came through. What I'm saying is, there's contracts that were drawn up, and you can literally go onto, I think, GSA and find these drawn up that are dependent. Okay, they're contingent on an invasion of Iran. Okay, then those same people who may, their former employees may now be the assistant defense secretary, are the ones rattling the saber to invade. You see what I mean? It'd be like me saying, hey, you know what? I really think we should set the house on fire because I'm trying to get the budget lifted for the fire station. I mean, that's what that's like. So yes, I agree. There's lots of things that come out good, and even war things that come out good from spending money, of course. But what I'm saying is, when all the signs point to the fact that the profiteers are driving the message, and that seems clear here, That's when people have to pump the brakes, and as long as it takes, try to make things as peaceful as they can, as long as they can, just so they can get their accounting straight. That's all I'm saying. I mean, war is inevitable. I think till man is on Earth, it's going to happen. We'll never have peace on Earth. It's never going to happen. It's just not in our nature. And so, what I am saying is, but you can manage the violence of humankind as best you can to at least maybe shift people towards a more creative outlook on life, where things continue to get produced and things continue to get invented, and which is a big reason why I love capitalism, but if we let people like, Raytheon, and God, I wish I could remember the name. It's like Dragon or something like that. I've never heard of it, or Darkon or something like that. But if we're seeing certain industries are driving chaos. Okay, they're driving chaos because it's profitable, and it's always profitable. So I'm not saying every war is fake, but what I am saying is every war has opportunists, either beforehand or afterhand, or post-war. So you're going to find that great example, and then I'll hand the mic back to you. When I was deployed for Enduring Freedom, right after 9/11, my unit, First Special Forces, our area of operations was Southeast Asia. So we ended up going to the southern Philippines because, quite honestly, I thought to deal with Abu Sayyaf group, which is pretty small, terrorist group, but they had American hostages. And I think it gave us, a reason to be there, quite honestly. But what happened was, we get there, and of course we're getting attacked and bombed, and a couple of friends blown up and that sort of thing. And we're doing live fire exercises. That means you're doing a training exercise with real bullets. And oh, by the way, if you run into a terrorist, you blow them away. But what started happening is the food sucked. Like, these contractors, DynCorp being one of them, sucked. Like, it was horrible. And so we're like, no, we're not going to do that. One thing about Green Berets and SEALs, and I'm sure Ben, we don't really take orders the way other soldiers do. We don't just get in lockstep and say, you'll never hear us saying we were just following orders, because it's stupid, and we'll get ourselves a new leader. But the thing was, it's like the food was so bad, we found instead this guy who was German, and his wife was Filipino, and he had a bratwurst stand in southern Philippines. it was called Mr. Sausage, and I know, it's a great name, right? And he's this big kind of cherubic German, and he was so happy because it was like, and we didn't want to tell anyone because it's like the food was so good. I mean, the other food, it was like there were like maggots in the rice and mold on the food because it was all contracted out. By the time it gets subcontracted, we're in the middle, we're sleeping on badminton courts for like a year, and having people shoot at the wall like that separates us from the highway just for fun. And the least thing they could do is make sure our food is good. I mean, the food in Iraq was fantastic. They had Subway and everything, but yeah, we had this. And so we're like, no, we're just going to go to Mr. Sausage. And we could, because most of us were married or were getting BAS, which means they weren't taking our food out of our paycheck. If you live in barracks, they take your food out.
That's not good.
It's like $200 a month, whether you eat in the chow hall or not. And so then I guess DynCorp and their subs complained to SOCOM, to Special Forces Command, and then they started docking us for 3 meals a day and just giving it to the contractors, whether we ate there or not, just giving it to the contractors. And so that's opportunism. And those are the kind of people, in my opinion, those kind of companies, the Halliburtons, the DynCorps, a lot of the logistics companies, and the manufacturers of like the Patriot missile, which they've expelled so many of those in Ukraine for a lot of times for no reason. Those are the people driving the war, because there's so much money to be made. And if you go to Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area, the Beltway, it's like Route 66 between D.C. and Dulles Airport drive down 267. It's called the Dulles Toll Road. And on your way, go through Fairfax and McLean, at Tyson's Corner. All you see is contract firms, big, huge glass contract firms, and the entire Arlington, Fairfax, Alexandria real estate economy is built around the defense industry, which didn't spring up to the degree it's at now until after 9/11. So you see, there's this whole infrastructure built on war, and some wars that were necessary, some that were not, but built on that. And then on top of it, you have sometimes more than half of the agency staff for the different intel agencies and different support agencies around the government, whether it's DIA, CIA, NSA, all those. It's almost a 50% contractor workforce, if not more by now. And they're calling the shots a lot of times. And that's why they have so much power. And that's what we have to be careful of, to not get wrapped up in the feelings, but to always just grab onto the facts, because that's, and I'll yield. Go ahead.
Well, what you were saying right now about facts versus feelings, I would throw it back at you and say, I'm trying to cut the Gordian knot of these conversations having to do with what is absolutely correct as far as this various degree of corruption and mismanagement and all these very, human problems. It's like if you're morbidly obese and you're suffering from all kinds of, venereal diseases, while at the same time somebody's about to chop your head off. At that point, the very first problem that you have to solve is making sure your head...
Wait.
Yes.
Just so I know I'm tracking here.
Yes.
How do we get from venereal diseases to the head getting chopped off? I'm sorry.
I'll explain. No. I'll explain.
Okay.
The analogy I'm using here is that getting your head chopped off means when you have aggressors like Russia and China that are going to be going into Europe and that are going to be causing a problem for us that at this point we're not ready to really address. And the venereal diseases and the morbid obesity is all of this waste and this bureaucratic glut and all these problems which are very real, which you're talking about. But I'm just talking order of operations here. We have to treat everything. We have to treat the obesity. We have to treat the venereal diseases. But first, we got to make sure that our head doesn't get chopped off. That's kind of how I go about my thinking when it comes to these very real problems.
I hear what you're saying, but wouldn't it make sense to, okay, so let's say your arms are the only thing you have to keep your head from getting chopped off. And so let's say, based on the fact that we have assigned ourselves as the stewards of defending democracy for the whole world, from, a Russian army that, again, can't really have the manpower, but we'll get into that another time. I just had to slip that in because... but where's the budget to make sure, seriously, that kind of military action doesn't happen overnight. The planning doesn't happen overnight. It's years in the making. And we knew it. We knew it long before. But we waited till Afghanistan cash machine went away before we did it. So what I'm saying is, based on what you're saying is, okay, what if by letting your body get neglected and your home, whatever you want to say, get neglected, you basically created the environment to let your head get chopped off. And I'm gonna move off the analogy because I'm getting lost in my own analogy. But what I'm saying is,
you're doing good.
If it was so important, it was such a threat, right? It's such a threat. Where's the intel on that? Where's the intel? Where's the troop buildups? Where is the urgency? I mean, keep in mind, most wars, we're building up troops. And even after what was it, Desert Storm and then Desert Shield, it still took us a few months. I mean, we were there pretty quick. We have rapid deployment units, but it took a while, to get people on the border, over to Saudi Arabia to go defend an actual ally, Kuwait, who'd been invaded. Now, what I'm saying is, if it was such an urgent thing, where was the buildup? Where was the increase? What, how come they didn't expand the number of linguists who were training in Russian until after they invaded Ukraine? Why was the focus on everywhere else? Why was the focus on I don't know, equity and wokeness, which it was. I mean, if you see Milley's speeches where he's like, I want to learn about, whatever. And where was the urgency? I mean, if we're spending all this money on the intelligence agencies, are you saying we were surprised by Russia? And if we weren't surprised, where was our preemptive actions? Because the only preemptive actions I saw were a bunch of Republican and Democrat senators and congressmen, most of which have defense contractors in their states, calling for war, before he was even doing anything or much except rattling a saber. And then a president doing everything, it seemed, in his power to make sure that war not only happened but continued. So what I'm saying is, we're the United States. If we are the stewards of democracy and we've assigned ourselves that role, isn't it incumbent upon us to make sure our intelligence is doing their job and that we are shifting these European-based assets around to maybe deter an invasion? We did it with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We did it with so many. We still do it in China occasionally, in the South China Sea. Where was the deterrence to keep Putin from invading? There was none. It was almost like we wanted him to invade. That's what it feels like.
And that's the reality that we're working with in this incarnation of our lives. And at that point, it's like, what do you want us to do? Yes, all that you said right now is true. What's the alternative? That's what I always, pragmatic Lev, I always keep coming back to. Okay, we suck. We have all these problems. Let's solve these problems.
I don't think it's incompetence, so don't misunderstand me.
If you think, okay, that's fine. But if you think it's intent, that is absolutely fine of you to think so, but it still leaves the question of, okay, with that being the intent, what are the choices that we can make right now? Because, again, either we assume that Putin is still part of the Great Reset, friends with Klaus Schwab, and is in on this whole thing, or we think that Putin is like a separate agent. He has his own things that he wants to accomplish, and that is why we still have to, at the end of the day, make some kind of a decision as far as how to stop him from going more into Europe. Given everything that you said right now, we still have these choices we have to make, and that's the problem, right?
Sure.
No matter how corrupt, no matter how bloated this whole system is, we still have to make these choices. Now, maybe it means that we need to have a bit of a great reset of the elites. Maybe it means that we have to have other people that are going to be coming in positions of power that are actually more responsible, like that whole cycle of history talking about, weak men make hard times make strong men make, good times, and all of that. Sure, that's like a fact of life. And what I'm saying is, we're not going to go away from that cycle of life. It's going to happen. We may not succeed right now with what's going on, and Putin may start going more into Europe and Poland. That's going to be our big wake-up call, like in World War II. Same thing there. We could have stopped Hitler way earlier. So things are going to get tough.
Putin is not Hitler, dude. He would have invaded long ago if he was Hitler.
He's the closest. He's the closest thing, but the difference is that Hitler was younger. Putin. No, I got to finish this.
Putin is closer to Hitler.
That's bullshit. That is complete bullshit.
They're both in the arts. They're both really short.
Putin's really short.
Putin might be really short, but Putin has an entire adult career steeped in international geopolitics. This man is a chess player. He's not a checkers player. And so the thing is, it's like, I just don't think it's a good comparison to compare. It is a talking point from left-wing media. I'm not saying you're left-wing media. Obviously, you're not. You're talking to me. But what I'm saying is, it's a classic talking point to anytime you want people to not like someone, you compare them to Hitler.
But
now, it's sad because I was hoping we'd migrate to comparing them to bin Laden, but apparently, the TikTok crowd thinks he's cool now because they're morons, and they apparently don't read anymore, or even watch any history that's older than 10 minutes old. But the point is, we can compare them to whoever we want. But what you don't have is any of the same factors that led to World War II, and that's a longer conversation. You don't have any of the economic factors. You have someone who has brought his entire defense infrastructure internal over the last 10 years, expecting to eventually get sanctioned. We have a guy who It was a joke to blame the Russians on anything, as recently as when Burn After Reading came out, if you've seen that movie.
That's a nice film. I like the Coen brothers a lot.
Yeah, when everyone's like, why'd they sell the secrets to the Russians? The Russians, like, why'd they go to the Russians? Like, it was ridiculous. So what I'm saying is, like, this, I'm not saying, obviously there's a war and there's real suffering. And like, I feel for the soldiers on the Russian side and the soldiers on the Ukrainian side and the families on the Ukrainian side, because I don't think the Russian families are that affected. But what I will say, I always feel bad for the soldiers. Because one thing about American soldiers, Russian soldiers, and I've worked with Russian soldiers, I've worked with Ukrainian soldiers, I've worked a lot. Special Forces works with a lot of different countries. Soldiers are soldiers. They only care about each other. They actually are probably the most apolitical people you'll ever meet are soldiers, because they're there to do a job. They're not there to blindly do a job. They're not going to execute Nazi-like orders because they're told to. Those, at least not in our army. But the thing is, it's like I always feel bad for the soldiers. I feel bad for Chinese soldiers crying on a bus because they're about to get their asses handed to them in hand-to-hand combat by a bunch of Indian soldiers. I feel bad for the soldiers because they are, at the end of the day, they are the tip of the spear for a bunch of fat bureaucrats that have never taken any fencing lessons. And that's how I look at it.
With the Russian soldiers,
that's my quote.
Okay. Well, with the Russian soldiers back in World War II, that was definitely the reality, much more than for the German soldiers, because the German generals used to eat together with the soldiers and sleep in like similar barracks. While with the Russian military, you had these generals who were the fat cats who were eating caviar while their soldiers were going out into the front lines and just like Zerg rushing their enemies.
Come on. That is all true, but to say the Nazi generals were eating with all the
at least from what I read, that was a different kind of situation in the German army, where even going back to when Hitler was having like the Hitler Youth and all of that, he made it a point to make sure that there was like this socialism going on, like nobody is like more higher up than somebody else.
Wait.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Hitler was a socialist. He was a socialist. In fact, every single business in Germany, every single business in Germany, by the way, just real quick on the side here, every single business in Germany during the Nazi power, it had to have like a representative of the Nazi party there to make sure that business was like well socialized. It was not a private industry by any means. So for all the people who say, oh, it was like capitalism under Germany, that is bullshit.
No, I'm not saying, I know it wasn't that. No, I get it.
But even as far as the military works, from what I understand, again, you're more of a military guy, so you could tell me.
I can guarantee you that, like,
yeah.
Okay, so here's how these things happen. Okay,
sure.
So we have very good officers, but in general, there's a huge social divide between officers and enlisted. It is literally like, upper middle and upper class versus working class and below. The latter being enlisted in terms of the majority of where they came from, their socioeconomic backgrounds. And so even in our military, and I'll say it's like, you'd always see the officers would take the gate guard positions, for the MP, if they're in the MPs, but only on like the holidays when there's a lot of traffic coming in and out of the base. So people are like, oh, look at that. They're doing the job so their soldiers can go home and eat with their families. And it's like, and one time I even caught one that wasn't even an officer. They just dressed a private like an officer so the officers could get credit for being down with the troops. So I certainly wouldn't believe that what you're telling me sounds like classic PR for the military. That's the kind of crap our army would do. And that's the kind of crap that like the communists do in China, where like they bring buses of like these woke, like the Harvard professors out in the 80s and into the 90s, and they would bus, and they even do with our governors as far as recently as like 4 years ago. And they're like, you got to see, it's ridiculous. And actually, that basketball player got a taste of that as well. I forgot his name, guy with the hair, and he was really fabulous, anyways, we got to him, but so real well-known guy, but he they would take the bus out, right? And they would drive, and I've seen this too because I've been to many trade shows in China, and you drive by and there's a guy in a suit. They've got the farmer taking a rest with his shovel, talking to the guy with the suit, and then the cop comes up and they're having a conversation. And then, without asking your tour guide, who's on the bus, who's obviously the party like babysitter, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I bet you're wondering what they're talking about." And even if you say, "No, no, I wasn't. I was trying to read my book," he'll say, yeah. So here we solve problems regardless of your role in society because that's what communism is and that's why it works. However, if you were in your own car and you just took a U-turn and went back, they're all taking off their costumes and going back to their shitty jobs. So the point is, like, I wouldn't put any stock in that sort of thing.
Well, that is not the hill. That is not the hill that I want to die on. The hill of talking about the equality among Nazi officers and soldiers. No, but the reason why I mentioned that in the first place was the sheer level of hierarchy within the Russian army. That was something that was the case, where you would have these generals that were very disconnected from what was happening in the troops. My own great uncle, he was in what was called the Strambat unit, which was the penal colony unit. So all those people who got arrested and were sent to the gulags, they were also fighting in the war. And the way that they were fighting is that they were in front, and the Russian soldiers were behind them with guns pointed at them. So they would be like a human shield that they would run in, and face the Nazi troops. So yeah, like, this is the kind of mentality, though, that's become fetishistic within Russian circles.
It's the communist mentality. Because the individual does not matter. I mean, and the Russians are well known for that, and so are every communist. Like, don't join the army or like avoid the draft if you're in a communist country, because and we're not technically individuals in the U.S. Army either. We do give up a lot of our rights when we sign and take that oath. We fall under a different system of law and everything. But as much as people say about our military who've never been around it and everything, I've seen a lot of militaries, and I can say, despite some flaws that will always come with a large organization full of weapons, if I'm ever taken hostage, please let it be the American military, because honestly, like, the Turks, the Chinese, hell, man, it's like, no, you don't want. I wouldn't even want to be taken hostage by the French. I mean, seriously, we are the nicest military that I've ever met. The nicest. Maybe Thailand could compete with us for that one, but that's about it.
I couldn't agree more, but I also think
I don't mean like nice in a woke way. I mean like humane.
Sure, but with that humaneness, here's what I think is like a psychological issue that's been going on recently. And again, like, I'm not pointing specifically like to the Trump supporting side here, but pretty much everyone. Mm-hmm. Americans, in my opinion, are too nice in the sense that they are willing to give a lot of trust to people who appear to seem like reasonable individuals. And there is an attribution that I think a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries don't have towards the other people because of communism, because being under communism made a lot of, like the Polish and so on and so forth, very suspicious of anybody who's trying to get them to do whatever or makes any kind of promises. And with the Americans, I think the real big issue is that they would look at somebody like Putin to think, hey, this could be like a reasonable guy. We're approaching it all wrong. We can make a deal with him. And that's at least coming from somebody who's like an Eastern European guy. That is where I think the American weakness is. That Americans think that Putin is capable of having some kind of a deal made, where, in my opinion, Putin doesn't know how long he's got left to live, even if he wants to live forever. His number one thing has been keeping this feedback loop going with his media. Because the way that it works in Russia is that all the, like, I know you guys talk about, like CNN and all that kind of stuff. Here is how the news program works in Russia. There's this guy named Gromov, who is Putin's first deputy chief of staff, Alexei Gromov. And his number one job is to make Putin happy. He's also the co-founder of Russia Today, RT. And here's the way that it works. The head of television channels attend weekly meetings at Gromov's office at the Presidential Administration Building in Moscow, where they are told what must be broadcast and what is forbidden. Gromov's session bring together the heads of all the major Russian public and private TV companies, Channel 1, VGTRK, so on and so forth, plus representatives of key government agencies, including the office of the president, the government, and the parliament.
So
A Kremlin, So a Kremlin official.
It's not fair, by the way. I didn't have notes ready, but go ahead.
All right, here we go. A Kremlin. I didn't even know I would have this in front of me here. This is improv here. This is from a recent piece that I'm writing right now. By the way, Lev's Lens Substack. The link is right
I'm
there.
learning a lot from you about how to market my own stuff during the cast. I never do that.
Always be selling. ABC from Glenn Ross.
Always be closing.
Closing.
Yeah.
Always be closing. Get them to sign on the line that is dotted. You got to have
that copy down.
You got to have brass balls. Anyway, a Kremlin official responsible for election campaigns also participates along with Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. A few regular attendees.
Can I just have you skip to the end and tell me?
Sure. Well, here's the end. Gromov outlines the president's schedule and gives direct orders about how to cover his appearances and what exactly should be shown or said in news reports. And what happens from there is that the people decimate the Russian propaganda around the TV. Putin does not go on the internet. He doesn't go on 4chan. He doesn't watch YouTube. The only thing that Putin watches is Russian television. And it becomes a feedback loop where the kind of propaganda that these people want Putin to receive, he ends up receiving. What do I mean by so? I'll send you the source right here. The source are all the people who have worked together with. The source, I can tell you right now, the source is the OCCRP. The OCCRP is the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. They are a nonprofit that gets to the bottom of a lot of these.
Just out of curiosity, I'm not being a smartass here.
Yes.
How is this project able to get inside Putin's den and his bedroom to know what he's watching?
That is a very accessible fact because a lot of the people who have formerly worked with Putin are available for interviews. They talk, especially people who have grown up with him for a long time.
That's hearsay.
I can send you the names of the individuals because Putin
It's still hearsay.
Then there is nothing. No, but then there is nothing that we could say at all. But then at that point, we have nothing to rely upon, which isn't.
See my point, though, right?
Like, I see. Yeah, but your point could be applied to pretty much every single thing on Earth. That's the problem with the point.
I think a problem with this entire thing, which honestly sounds like, and this actually sounds like it's pushed by Russian propaganda to make Putin not look smart. Because you're talking, it doesn't line up, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You're talking about a guy who ran Russia's premier intelligence agency and was a field operator, who all of a sudden, after years of training, of multi-sourcing, recruiting sources, assets, and everything, is just going to trust the guy that says you can only watch this. It doesn't make sense. It sounds to me like it's a way to get the West to underestimate Putin.
Nobody's telling them you only have to watch this. This is Putin's own decision, and this is.
I would imagine Putin probably can watch and get access to watch whatever he wants.
Again, I think the problem here is that it's giving somebody who is of his position much more qualifications than is necessary to do what he does. The man is really good at being a criminal. That doesn't mean that the man is really good at having the objective view of reality of how to properly act. I'm talking about Putin, exactly.
Do you know his resume?
I know his resume.
He's more than just a criminal. He was running the KGB.
Of course, he was yeah.
That'd be like saying George H.W. Bush was a criminal because of our views on the CIA. I mean, that just not is. I'm sorry, and I'll say this because I've met ex-KGB officials, and I can say it was better intelligence than we had during the Cold War. Trust me. I mean, I don't know about their other intelligence, but their human intelligence agency was the best. the best.
And there are
You
very
know,
talented people who are around Putin, but there's
I
another
don't
problem.
think I don't think it's wise to
There's another problem
underestimate.
you're discounting, and this is a very important point, which I think also talks about dictatorship in general, including talking about Donald Trump. So here is the main point.
Not a dictator, but go ahead.
Not yet. And here's the thing. I know that a lot of people on the left
Okay.
love talking about how, oh, Putin is Hitler and how Donald Trump is a dictator,
You
Donald
just
Trump
said
is Orange
Putin is Hitler.
Hitler. Exactly, and I stand by that. But here's the point.
Okay.
There is a problem that occurs when you are somebody who sees a lot of these craptastic media outlets talking about these talking points, and then people who are of that mentality, they get into this problem where, shit, I'm never going to say anything that these people are agreeing with, so now you've caught yourself in a bit of a trap. If
Well,
MSNBC...
that's certainly not me.
No, I'm not saying that it's you, but I'm saying that this is a tendency that people can sometimes have when they go into any circle, be it left, be it right,
So you're talking
any kind
like
of
you're
industry.
talking about bias, right?
Yes, I'm talking about bias, but I'm talking
Okay.
specifically about something that is
Didn't
so...
your family escape from the Soviet Union?
They escaped from the Soviet Union, yeah.
Have you explored bias in yourself? I'm not
I'm-
saying you are. I'm just saying, have you taken an objective, done an objective self-evaluation of where your views come from? I know you're very well read. I know you do your research. So, but what I'm saying is, even if you're well read and you do your research, like we both are,
Yes.
for me, it takes like a catalytic event to like change my view on something, because I'm not saying that I ever participate in confirmation bias, but I think there's almost a subconscious tendency to gravitate towards certain sources. You see what I mean? And it is a struggle every day to make myself watch like Morning Joe, because I just can't stand that guy. He sniffs all the time and it's disgusting. But and to watch every single thing I can, at least for like, or listen to it on my podcast. And I try to get like 15 minutes of each one in, because there's only so many hours in the day. Try to get the headlines, because I want to challenge myself. And then, so what I'm asking you though is, and you don't have to answer, but I think
will answer.
Well, go ahead.
Here we go. So I
And
am
that was
I am the
gotcha, by the way.
perfect I am the perfect experiment here, because most of my time as far as news outlets goes, look at my Twitter timeline. Look at who I follow on Twitter. See the sheer amount of pro-Trump people, MAGA people, people who are against the current thing, and also being 4chan adjacent, as far as always going on 4chan, going on poll, looking at the news.
4chan? I actually don't know what that
I'll get to
is.
that a little bit later. Don't worry. I'm not going to forget
Okay.
that. But the point is that I am constantly surrounded by as many sources as you could possibly think of information that are saying the exact opposite of what I think is the case. So as far as
I do got to point out though, you just listed all of those assets are on Twitter.
Twitter, YouTube, as far as like Sticks Hexenhammer 666 goes, I'm a big admirer of his work, even though I do disagree with him. But Sticks is somebody who has been very pro-Trump, against America intervening in Ukraine, and I listen to him a lot. In fact, I love in the morning drinking my coffee, listening to Sticks.
You put all these in the when you post this video?
Sure.
Interested in the scene. Because
Absolutely.
I mean, I actually made friends with a guy named, what is it, like, I think it's like Mr. Pickle or something like that. And don't run away with that. But I was on a space, and sometimes I make a point to, a couple times a week, just pick a random space and just listen to it, just so I could get the pulse of people from that I might not normally listen to. And I've got to say, this was a discussion about, Israel and Hamas. And it was obviously it was a really pro Hamas channel. Like I'm not saying pro Palestine. This was like a pro Hamas channel, and Americans, which is really scary. That's a topic for another day, because I'm like, I mean, whoa, like time out. Like I'm listening to these people justifying things. I can't believe they're justifying. But that aside, and Mr. Pickle gets on there. He sounds legitimately like an Arabic speaker. He says he's from the area. I speak Arabic, so I know the accent. You know, fake Russian accent when you hear one, I'm sure. And it's like he was so well articulated, making such great points and doing it in such a great way to allow for the analysis of those even crazy topics that have been laid out, and keeping is cool because I don't know if I could keep that cool. And it was just like, honestly, it was like romper room, man. It's like they're just throwing shit at this guy, like no matter how. And I was so impressed with him. And then I read his Substack, and he's pro Ukraine, like all the way. He's got his little flag and everything, like all you fellas do. And but he even in his Substack, I could see him constantly challenging his own research, his own outcomes, and constantly updating. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there. Is like we have to constantly relook our old work, relook our old views, because it's not so much that we're changing, it's that the world is constantly changing. So you could be, anti Ukraine defense tomorrow if you found out certain things. Just like I was always pro president of the United States, even under Obama. I didn't like a lot of things. I was like, okay, this is all right. Benefit of the doubt. This is the first time in my life I've ever despised an administration. I would have never thought I'd think like this 4 years ago, ever. So what I'm saying is, what I learned from this guy is that I think he figured out that like he's not really challenging himself. He's like in a canoe and just trying to navigate it, and that's what it feels like. And I think we all should be. And you do a good job of that. I'll say that. You were on my show, which is Unrestricted Invasion, which is every Monday and Thursday nights, 8:00 at dailyclout.io. But with JJ Carroll. But you and JJ got on there. Now you got this guy who's my age, 24-year veteran on the border, hardcore guy, very smart guy. He's published author, and then Lev. How I'm guessing you're 25.
You flatter me. No, I'm not 25. Guess how old I am. In fact, no, in the chat, guess how old I am? Write it in the chat, and I'll tell you guys later. So anyway, as far as what you're talking about, though, I couldn't agree more. I think it's very important to keep all of our biases in check, but that's like why I said that the things that I'm constantly surrounded by.
The way you guys went.
Oh, yeah.
Like, honestly, like, I didn't know how that was going to end, and I'm like, JJ's getting like a bull, like he's keeping it together, and then it's like, and you're like you do, you're like a honey badger, like with you're getting your point through. And so it was really interesting to watch, and I loved watching you guys come together, and he just adored you after that. It was great. So, all right,
speaking of coming together, we have the great and powerful Benjamin Sklar joining us on Break the Rules. Benjamin, I really appreciate you coming in right now and talking to us about this. And people are guessing my age on the chat. Benjamin, I told you how old I am, and you said that was kind of surprising. So we will find out in the chat who exactly gets it right. But anyway, for those who do not know, Benjamin, you are a ex-IDF paratrooper, and Brian, apparently, I found this out for the first time today, also paratrooper.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Lev. Great to connect, Brian.
Great to connect with you.
Where are you in the world?
Well, right now it looks like I'm a hostage myself with this horrible background, but no, I'm in my we're in the Hudson Valley, in a very old house that we love, and somewhere near Hudson.
Beautiful.
I'm not being cagey. I just it would take too long to describe where I am. So near Hudson, in Hudson Valley, New York. And how about you?
I'm in Long Island, near Lev.
What part of Long Island?
I'm near West Hampton.
Oh yeah, okay. I know exactly where you are. I do a lot of work. I've done a lot of work down on those reservations down there.
Nice. How do you know Lev?
How do we know each other? It was like one of the streams that a former member of Break the Rules invited you on, and from there on in we started talking, and finally we got back in touch recently. But I think it's very interesting. Number one, it's very interesting how the lighting is also very similar between you two guys, and the fact that you guys are both ex-paratroopers. And also the most interesting thing here, I think, is that it's important right now to get somebody who has a connection with Israel, who was in the IDF, to talk about what exactly is going on in the greater scheme of things when it comes to Israel going into Gaza and what it means for geopolitics in the entire world. Because we had Saudi, for instance, that was about to be very friendly with Israel with the Abraham Accords, and now all of a sudden this happens. And I still bet, and I don't know what you think, Benji, but I bet that a lot of the people who are in the royal family in Saudi, they don't want any of this stuff to happen. They just want to peacefully trade with Israel and, sign the Abraham Accords. But I also feel like there is a lot of pressure from imams within that region and other Islamic regions that are going to basically like chop the heads off of all the leaders who would not fall in line when things get too intense. So in a way, I feel like Islam or radical Islam is kind of being used right now, or will be used in the future, to get a repeat of the Yom Kippur War. Now, I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think that there's going to be there was an attempt to do that. That's what's on my mind right now about the question of like the bigger, the bigger scope of this. Benjamin, what do you think?
Wow. Regarding Saudi Arabia, everyone's been talking about how the reason Hamas attacked was because Saudi Arabia was going to sign a peace agreement with Israel, and Iran didn't want that to happen. I think a lot of people need to understand the difference between Sunni and Shia and how that plays a role in what's going on in the region, because Iran is Shia, Hezbollah is Shia, but Saudi Arabia is Sunni as well as Hamas. So there's a lot of interpolitics I can imagine amongst those parties that we Americans, we Jews, don't appreciate. There's civil wars amongst the Arab nations that just have to do with Islam. And I looked into the difference between Sunni and Shia, and it comes down to who followed Muhammad, who, after Muhammad passed, who took power after he died.
Ali, Abu Bakr, whole Game of Thrones thing there. And they even have this thing where the Fatimid dynasty was named after Fatima, who was the daughter of Muhammad. And allegedly what went down was that Fatima's house was attacked and burned down by Omar, who ended up being the guy after Abu Bakr who took charge and became caliph. So there's been like this blood feud going back of, like this blame game where, you had the Fatimid dynasty versus the Abbasid dynasty, who had the black flag, and the Fatimids had the white flag. So yeah, Benjamin, like you're absolutely on point here. There has been this animosity, and I have another question here, unless there is one more thing that you wanted to add regarding that particular animosity, because I did want to bring up Syria, but go ahead.
Well, what's on my mind is learning about Brian and his background and why you invited him on the show.
Check out the private chat.
Yeah, that's going to give you all the information about Brian. Brian, for those who are just tuning in right now, ex-Special Forces, private investigator, husband of the wonderful Naomi Wolf, and ex-paratrooper, as we said before, and in the ex-military, specifically the Special Forces Intel Division. So, very, very, very smart guy. Gives me a nice, fighting opponent for the debate that we were having about Ukraine before he got here. But regarding Syria right now, so I wanted to rewind things a little bit back.
Wait, really
sure,
quickly.
Sure.
Can we first hear about Ben, and then I'll talk about myself, just so people know who these guys are that they're listening to?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah, Ben, I would love for you to talk a little bit about yourself. I do want to say also that you have been an incredibly motivational person for Brian. Brian's been listening to your motivational conversations. So tell us a little bit about you, and then I promise you guys we're going to get to Syria. We're going to get to Syria. Anyway, Benjamin, go for it.
So my background is I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. My mother is from Mexico City. My father is an American Jew. My mother grew up Catholic in a big Mexico City family and met my father in law school and converted to Judaism. And I have two older siblings. I went to college in Massachusetts, played football at Amherst College, which is a liberal arts school. And then I decided to join the IDF, rather than going to work on Wall Street like my peers, and I worked at Goldman Sachs my junior summer internship. I was on the track of going to work on Wall Street, but I wanted to serve in the Israeli military. I always had a chip on my shoulder that I wanted to serve in the IDF, and I volunteered. I didn't have to. I'm not Israeli. I have no family in Israel.
Yeah. Can I ask really quickly how I didn't know you could do that? How's that work?
If you are Jewish and you check the boxes for the IDF, you can fly to Israel and enlist and serve amongst the Israeli population as if you're one of them. You don't get any benefits or privilege, and the country takes care of you. Like cab drivers will give me free rides, hotels will give me free rooms, restaurants will give me free meals. The country, society will take care of you. But at the end of the day, you're just one of them. You get the same salary, the same everything. And then
I mean, that would be almost irresistible for any young man looking for something beyond the horizon that's a little more exciting. I mean, that's kind of cool. And what a great idea. I mean, to get troops.
And my parents, my friends were very against the idea at the time. Why would you go move to Israel, join an army, and fight a fight that's not your fight, quote unquote, when you could be building a career, a life in America? And why not just join the U.S. military? You're American. You're not Israeli. At the time, I didn't have an Israeli passport. So why wouldn't you go join the U.S. military and serve in Iraq or Afghanistan or Germany or Japan, etc.? So those were all considerations I took. I was groomed to go to West Point. I almost went to West Point. And I decided to join the IDF, and it was the best decision I ever made. And today it's very interesting because to half of the world, it's something that I would want to hide. They wouldn't want, if they knew I was an IDF soldier, they would see me as the enemy, the terrorist, the bad guy, someone who doesn't understand the world. But the other side of the community, the part of the world that I am involved in, sees me as a hero, as someone who did something that was honorable. And that's how I see it as well. But especially walking around New York City, where I work as a lawyer in Times Square, and seeing the pro-Hamas rallies, it's very interesting to be an IDF veteran in today's world.
Oh.
Wow, I don't even know what to say. I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you, Brian, because I have this habit of getting to like the subjects without the introductions sometimes. So I really appreciate that. And Benjamin, I really appreciate you coming here. And when it comes to why Israel, obviously it worked out as far as the joy that you found in it and the people that you got to connect with. But going back to that question that people ask, why not America? Why Israel?
The answer, looking back, I believe, was I would have gotten more meaning out of serving in the Israeli military than I would have gotten out of joining the American army. I identified as Jewish, and I thought that I could make more of a contribution and an impact by serving the Israeli army than I would in the U.S. Army. And
that's fair.
And I just felt like they needed me more. And maybe there was some selfish aspect to it where it would have benefited me more long term as a career play serving the IDF than the U.S. military. But I don't think I thought like that at the time. But I think now I believe it has, because I'm very involved with the Israeli business community.
Sure. But it could also help you. I mean, I think anytime you're in, a serious soldier, I don't mean like a 2-year enlistment guy like we used to have here. And I'm not saying that's bad if you only did 2 years, but I don't know. How long were you in before I put my foot in my mouth?
2 years.
2 years. Because I think you guys have the 2-year enlistment, but in the U.S. military, you guys worked that whole time. I know that. Whereas in the U.S. military, they used to have these 2-year enlistments, and it's kind of like, by the time you got through admin, it's almost over. Like they never really did anything. So no offense.
How long did you serve?
I served for 11 years active duty.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Where did you serve?
So I was I served I went to language school and I learned Arabic, and then after that, I think, because I was in the intelligence field, that's what I qualified for and signed up for. So my first unit of note was 5th Special Forces, which deals exclusively with Middle East, North Africa. And, I was in the 101st before that. And then after that, I did a strategic position. And then I was with 1st Special Forces, which deals with Southeast Asia. And these are the Green Beret units. So I was the detachment intel sergeant in charge of the small teams that would go out ahead of the Green Beret teams and either embed themselves or hide themselves to collect on all the people that want to do us harm. But in terms of where I went to 47 different countries because, as I'm sure you know, because we've done some work in your area, Special Forces doesn't, like, they do so many, I would call them conflicts or situations that you don't even hear about them. Like, they're not secret. It's just that, like, for instance, if you see there's a rebellion in Uganda, you can guarantee a Special Forces unit's already deployed, or like Haiti or something like that. So it was a lot of like 2-month deployments or 3-month deployments. The longest one was actually the Philippines after 9/11, down in Zamboanga. And I was there for like almost a year, and I loved it. Like, honestly, I loved my whole military experience, as hairy as some things got, because, yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was easy. I got to say, like, I don't mean easy physically. You get used to anything, but I just like the fact that you could literally always focus on your job and never worry about money.
Mm-hmm.
That was just nice. Yeah.
Because they provided you housing, food.
We get paid well. I mean, in our military, I don't know if we still do, but like, people see the base pay,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, that's not that much. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not, but you got to remember you're paying very little in taxes. Like, you don't pay state tax. Your base pay is so low, so you pay very little federal tax. And then there's all these extras. Like, I got language pay, I got parachute pay. These are like $250, $225 extra a month, and they add up.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you live off base, they give you basic housing allowance, which is like $2,000 a month on top of your salary. So yeah, it's a good paycheck. But I mean, I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice because I never had to worry about anything but getting really good at my job and then training my soldiers to be really good at theirs. And, just focusing so much on the job. I've never had that before or ever since. So that was nice.
And what is Daily Clout?
Daily Clout is a news media. I'm going to get this wrong, and she's sitting in the other room. But basically, it's a news media tech platform. It also has, a couple features like Bill Cam, where you could read live bills as they're going through, comment on them, get the embed code, stick it in your social media, throw comments right at the people drafting them. And then it's also got almost like a CRM type of function called Communities, where people can mount major campaigns to, do some good, make a difference. For example, my wife, Naomi Wolf, who owns it, and her COO, Amy Kelly, led and are still leading 3,000 volunteers who have been sifting through 55,000 Pfizer documents, looking for the adverse events that are in those documents. They were just being kept from the American people, and the FDA was forced to release them, per Texas Supreme Court. But 55,000, scientific documents, how to get through that. So they crowdsourced it using Communities, and they produced a book, and they produced like 89 different reports on things that were reported by Pfizer to the FDA that were being kept from the American people.
Wow.
So that's an example of what they do. And then we have like really cool shows like mine, which is on Mondays and Thursdays. I'm doing the marketing thing on purpose just to get Lev. But so I do a show with my friend JJ Carroll. Would love to have you on. It's called Unrestricted Invasion, where he was 24 years on the border, and then my knowledge. And then we just kind of, it's kind of like it's like talking now, like we do that, but we let the crowd participate. We go over issues and we bring in guests. Like we had a guest in from the Daily Caller last night, who's up on the Maine border reporting on Chinese illegal hemp growing industries. And then, there's different videos on different channels, I guess. We have a mindfulness coach on there. She's great. Her name is Aura. We have Shannon Joy. She's a well-known radio caster. My wife, of course, does the Geneva Bible readings, which is really cool. But she also does current events and Pfizer updates and stuff like that. So a whole lot of things.
Fascinating.
Like a community kind of thing. It's kind of cool.
And when it comes to communities, that is something that is very important for a lot of Americans as well as a lot of Israelis, which is what I think a lot of people who are anti-Israel are missing, just how much, as far as I understand, Israel takes care of the Israeli people there, that there is a lot of value that is put in. And I think one of the things that Americans who are anti-Israel, who are not on the left but are more on the right, what they are afraid of the most is, when it comes to Israel, they kind of see there being a lack of this same kind of care when it comes to the American government. And Brian, I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on this as well, of the American government to the American people, where they almost see like, oh, all this money is going to Israel, and the American politicians are like part of AIPAC, and they just care about giving money to Israel, and they don't give a crap about the American people. Why should we like Israel? So that is the argument that a lot of people who are more on the right, who are anti-Israel, are putting forth. I'm curious, Benjamin, if you have any thoughts on that, and Brian as well.
You take the mic, Brian.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I would say the problem is not anything that's going on in the world. Those people just need to get a clue, because you said, they think it's because, like, for example, AIPAC is just donating money and stuff like that. But the Biden administration supports funding Israel. So it's truly, a transpartisan issue, if you will. I just don't think people know enough to really make good assessments, and they're letting social media and trends make decisions for them. Because I've talked to a lot of people, and I know the area well. I know the politics exceptionally well, not as well as some people, but I know that stuff well. And there's some people that, and I know it well, but I have to admit, I didn't even know that Hamas was Sunni. That's news to me. So I learned something tonight. I always just assumed they were Shia. But people just don't know. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't know that, Hamas was technically the government, and people don't know what a terrorist group is. Like, there's some people that don't really know who Osama bin Laden is. And so
there are people who don't know who Hitler is.
There's people that, most people in China have never heard of the Tiananmen Square massacre. So what I'm saying is I can't really make that assessment of what they're thinking. I can say the amount of data, the studies you could actually read on HHS about the effect of social media on, just your ability to concentrate. I just don't think people are really that clued in as they used to be. And I think that's by design, because so much is coming at them like artillery, that no one dives deep anymore unless you've got the time and it's your job. Like, it's my job, I'm lucky. But if I had a full-time job and, baby and everything like that, it's like I'd have to make the time and shut off devices and ignore left and right media, all sorts of media, and read. And I always tell people, read, and then only watch TV and social media, get a feel for the pulse of the people, but never let the people decide what is the facts.
Well, before Benjamin responds, I just want to respond to what Brian said, where while I do agree with that great assessment, I would add that there's more of a guttural thing that I think is going on when it comes to a feeling of dissatisfaction that a lot of people have, and they build up resentment towards people who, in a way, are doing something that they themselves would like to do. For instance, when I went around in Brooklyn, I went to these more, let's say, conservative Jewish neighborhoods, and they were very trad in the sense, like, a lot of the very online people are longing for the trad lifestyle. The women are wearing, like, these nice, flowy dresses, traditional, more based in, traditional gender roles, things of that nature. And the focus on the family is very much a part of Jewish life. Like, that's going to be a very common thing. You hear about the stereotype of the, extremely overdoting Jewish mother, who constantly makes sure that her son, gets enough to eat and all that kind of stuff. So, and always focusing on education, focusing on study. So I think that there is a sense almost of jealousy of, why are they able to have this ability to get the best out of what they're doing? And we want that too. And we don't have that. Our politicians aren't like that. So we're going to blame the people who are actually being very successful when it comes to that, and attribute any of the problems that are going on in the world to the people who end up being very successful. The only other thing that I would add, though, is that there are people, I mean, I'm Jewish, and I've looked at a lot of, let's say, more left-leaning people who are Jewish. Personally, I think a lot of them are being very dumb, but they're also pretty good at doing certain things. So let's say you grew up in, New York City, you go work for, I don't know, the New Republic or some kind of a leftist magazine, and hey, you happen to be pretty good at your job, you got a good education and you were good at your studies, and hey, all of a sudden, you're like the number one person who's really good at doing this particular job. If it wasn't for you, if you weren't there, if, let's say, the Jewish people were never like a thing, there would have been somebody else that would have taken that role that would have been, like the best at that role. But hey, you happen to take that role. So when you end up doing something bad for society, people end up blaming the entire, like the monolith. People end up blaming all Jews. And that almost seems like, and Ben, I'm curious what you think about this. It almost seems like a responsibility that's brought on the shoulders of Jewish people, where it's almost like if bad things happen, from somebody within the Jewish community, all Jews are blamed. And it's almost like this kind of pressure to, let's be the best people we could possibly be, and let's try to address a lot of these concerns that people have, and try and if somebody's causing some trouble, we're going to be doubling down and fixing that, and if not, then all of us are going to be blamed. So in a way, it's like a giant pressure machine that kind of like forces you to get better and figure out like what the problems are in society so as to address them, so these things don't happen.
Or you just want to.
Or you just want to, but I think like the wanting happens, I think, kind of from that pressure. But I don't know. That's just like my crazy musings as somebody who's just been observing what's been going on, with the anti-Semitism. But I know, Benji, any thoughts on that?
Well, Ben, before you answer that, I want to say what they need to do is go check out Ben's social media,
yes,
and his YouTube, because I was checking out just to see who you were, and I was like, oh, that's true. Yes. So that's why I'm looking forward to your answer on this. Because to me, it sounds like,
what videos did you see?
Sounds like a them problem, not a they problem.
What videos did you see, or what are you referring to?
I think it was on your Instagram or something. You have these like short clips and all this, and yeah, they're pretty good.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Brian.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, you said earlier about how people are just getting artilleried with content and not diving deep. I think that's the essence of the problem. When I think about what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I think of it in two arenas. There's on the ground, what's actually happening in Israel/Palestine and the lives of the people over there. And then there's everyone else, the billions of other people who are just talking, thinking about it, watching it online, but aren't living the reality of being there. And I'm in the second camp. And why does the second camp even matter? It's because people's opinions somehow influence countries' leadership and the flow of money, the flow of goods, the flow of travel, tourism. There's just so much that goes into the way people think. And what dictates the way people think? Social media. Social media is God in today's world. And who's in charge of social media? The people. Look at TikTok. It's crowdsourced. And the issue with social media is most people are anti-Israel because they don't believe it has the right to exist, because they don't know why Israel exists in the first place. If you walked around Times Square and had a poll, do you believe Israel has the right to exist? I bet the vast majority of people wouldn't even know where Israel is on the map if you showed it to them.
Yep.
And they wouldn't know the history of Israel, why it even exists, and they just see it as the bad guy. It's the David versus Goliath, good guy versus bad guy. In Israel, in today's world, is the bad guy, and Israel, we Israelis, are the good guy. We're defending ourselves. We believe we have the right to exist in our ancestral homeland, and if we don't have the right to defend ourselves, where else do you want us to go? Where do you want us to immigrate to if you're going to kick us out from the land to the sea? And are we going to go to America? Are we going to go to Russia? Where do you want us to go? There's nowhere else to go. It's the only place we can be. And so we have to defend ourselves where we are, but people don't want Israel to defend themselves, or the self-defense, the law of the right to self-defense is really under the microscope in Israel. And it's like, and then it comes into the laws of war and armed conflict, and then you have to really understand those rules and the rules of self-defense. And then it gets really murky when you think about the West Bank, because that's another front in Israel. There's Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Egypt, Jordan, and then there's the West Bank. And the West Bank is the thorn in Israel's side. Everywhere else, I feel like Israel has a very clear right to self-defense, but in the West Bank, it becomes political and religious. And when religion gets involved, it starts to become murky, where lines can get drawn.
You're talking about like where the Arabian Muslims live versus where the Jewish settlers are living, right?
Right. I'm talking about in Israel today, the government is right-wing and is very pro Israel's autonomy or right to govern the West Bank. And of course, you can break it down from the Oslo Accords of Area A, B, and C, and you have to understand that to even join the conversation from an intellectual intelligent point of view. But having served in the West Bank, having served in Hebron and Ramallah and Jerusalem, it's really challenging to foresee a future of Israel and Jews living in the West Bank in peace when the Palestinian people wholeheartedly don't want us there. It's like, at the end of the day, what are we all talking about? What is this war about? Why is even Israel-Palestine, the conflict, on the map? Like, at the end of the day, we want peace, meaning people stop killing each other and people can send their children to school and not have to be afraid of them getting killed in a terrorist attack. Like, if that's the goal. That's where we all want to go. We have to not be afraid of our children dying. And then how do we get there? When the Palestinian people are, I believe, brainwashing through the education system, supporting their children to become martyrs, and committing terrorist attacks in the name of jihad, in the name of resistance. And if you have a society that is telling their children it's a good thing, you're a warrior, you're a hero if you blow yourself up on an Israeli bus, how can there ever be peace? So at the end of the day, my final point is, who's the leader on the Palestinian side who's going to stand up and say our future is not based on jihad and blowing ourselves up, but actually shaking hands with our Israeli counterparts and building a brighter future together? Show me that Palestinian leader.
Well, the son of the Hamas leader who was recently speaking against his father. That's
love that guy.
He's fantastic. Yes.
And there is also a weird thing where, from what I understand, there is a large amount of people who are within Hamas and within various radical Muslim organizations that are actually agents of Mossad and have been working there undercover for a very long time. And that also makes it a very strange situation as far as how do you engage with the Islamic world in general going forward. Because, well, before that, the Katyusha rocket situation, that's another big deal in the West Bank from what I heard, because one of the arguments for the settlement settlements, not a religious argument, but a purely utilitarian argument, is that if you do not have settlements in that area, more of that area can then be used to have the Katyusha rockets that end up firing into Israel. Would you agree that that's the case or not?
Oh, I wouldn't use the word Katyusha rockets. I would just use rockets.
Rockets,
Type
yeah.
of rockets.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you talk to Israelis, they would say, in 2005, we gave Gaza back to the Palestinian people. Look what they did with it. We gave back southern Lebanon. We didn't give it back because it was always theirs, arguably, but we gave it back from a military standpoint. We gave it back Lebanon to the Lebanese people, and look what Hezbollah has done with it. If we're going to give the West Bank to the Palestinian people, what do you think they're going to do with the West Bank? Are they going to turn it into the new Singapore or Hong Kong of the Middle East, or are they going to turn it into a terrorist state? And that's why people aren't in support of a two-state solution, because they believe that state, the Palestinian state, will become a terrorist state, meaning they'll use all the money to building weapons and have a nationalistic goal of destroying the state of Israel.
And they've shown that. I mean, it's not unbased. I mean, you're right. It's like they have shown that. Like all of that support that was supposed to build the infrastructure, they didn't build their infrastructure. They built their tunnel infrastructure. They built weapons. Those rockets, a lot of them are made from a lot of the materials that are meant for something else.
Right.
So it's, they've demonstrated what they'll do. And this does not, of course it doesn't speak for everyone there, but what I will say is this is like, well, yeah, actually, let me let you finish your thought, because I was about to segue out of this towards propaganda, but I don't want to cut you off.
No, you're not cutting me off. And I'm just back a few points. The Palestinian leader, let's say the son of Hamas becomes the Palestinian leader. He won't be, because a political leader is voted by the people. And if the people are in favor of Hamas and their use of violence and terrorism, then they're never going to find a pacifist, someone who wants to be trying to create a peace agreement. And then if I'm just picturing our audience and the leaders of the student organizations on campuses who are pro Hamas, they're going to be calling me. I already know what they're saying, because I follow all the pro-Palestinian accounts on social media, and I listen to what they have to say. And they say that Israel is the terrorist state. What about Israel killing all the babies in Gaza? What were the violent ones? And it's so hard to communicate with someone who, at the end of the day, doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. At the end, if you don't recognize our right to exist, we'll never be able to be in conversation and actually have dialogue, because you don't see you don't believe we should be here. You don't see our ancestral birthright to living in the land of Israel. And like, it's so sad, because Muslims and Jews are brothers. Abraham, both of our founding father, was this guy named Abraham who lived in modern day Iraq, and he had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael was the first Arab, and Isaac is the second Jew. And here we are, brothers fighting, killing each other for thousands of years over land and religion. And I feel like if we could just all get slapped in the face and wake up and realize, hey, we're all ants on this planet killing each other over these religious beliefs. Why don't we put down our arms and realize how much good we could do together, how much we could improve each other's lives and the lives of our families and our future children and the generations to come, if we just reread the Torah and the Quran in different ways to realize that we should be helping each other rather than hurting each other.
It's definitely a lofty goal to achieve. The certain things that may end up getting in the way is that, as far as correct me if I'm wrong, the Quran goes, they have a long history of jurisprudence where it's passed down from master to a disciple, as far as religious things having to do with how you conduct war, morality laws. the government and the religion are one in that sense. And with Israel, it's slightly weird because on one hand, it's supposed to be like a Jewish government, but on the other hand, you get all the gay parades in Tel Aviv, and you have, a lot of liberalism within the state of Israel. So say, wait a minute, well, what about all of the, Torah-based, laws having to do with like the stoning of the, what was it, Mary Magdalene? You remember like the, all of that hard, Stone Age stuff, pardon the pun, it's stoning. But it's like we have these books that some people are able to not take as, let's say, seriously, except for like the ultra orthodox, some of whom actually don't want Israel to exist because the Messiah hasn't arrived yet, as you know. But then we also have people who understand the core of a lot of what the religions are talking about, as far as at the end of the day, I personally think, Ben and Brian, I don't know if you agree, that we are all one, and that we should respect every one of us as being, a branch of the same tree here. But when it comes to the kind of programming that some people have when it comes to, I would rather this life be sacrificed for the greater good. On one hand, it could be a very noble thing, but on the other hand, it means that little kids get celebrated as martyrs, when they're killed, or the teenage sons get celebrated as martyrs when they suicide bomb themselves. And this is something that I've seen, like the videos of mothers, like celebrating the fact that their own kids, like in Gaza, ended up becoming these martyrs. And so, like, man, that is going to be like a project that would take generations and generations to change.
And do you know, have you heard of radicalization and how a lot of that works? I mean, and Ben, I don't know if you've seen this, I'm sure you have, but a lot of that pre-martyr, I don't know what you even call it, like indoctrination it's very I don't know, like, so you decide you're going to, start hanging out with the, more radical Muslims, because they make sense, that sort of thing. And then you do, and then before you know it, I'm not saying they're all innocent, but what I am saying, it's kind of like they do celebrate your death before you die a lot of times. And I can't speak for Hamas, but a lot of the terrorist groups that I've gone against and targeted, they celebrate your martyrdom before you die, and they reward your families a lot before you die. And then it becomes one of these things where, like, you kind of got to do it at that point, because they're going to lose everything and be thrown out, or worse, of society, because you're already a hero. What do you mean you didn't go through with it? So there is a lot of that kind of societal pressure in those communities where extremism is really acute, where it's there's something I want to say, like, it reminds me of, but I don't want to. But I will say that it's kind of like when, I don't know, it's like if you've ever made friends with someone and they come from like a very like pressuring family, and before you know it, you're like robbing a bank. It's kind of like that. You're like, how'd I get here? And you can't back out, because they already bought your mom the new house. They already, made sure that your family has protection, the implied threat, and they don't threaten. But the implication is, well, if you're not a martyr, you don't get all this stuff. They let you know you're a martyr and what it feels like to be a martyr before you even die in a lot of cases. Ben, have you seen that radicalization?
Yeah. On that point, I know that when a Palestinian dies due to an act of terrorism, the Palestinian Authority will pay the family a stipend, I believe, for years, decades. I don't know the details, but the pay for slay law of the Palestinian Authority, where if someone commits an act of terrorism, the Palestinian government will incentivize or sponsor the family, which really questions the incentives that are being promoted. But like earlier here, I was talking like a leftist. Peace. Why can't we all get along? Why can't we all be friends? Come on, guys. After October 7th, that whole narrative of a two-state solution, why can't we be friends, it was taken off the table for millions of Israelis. and Jews around the world because of that barbaric act where they slaughtered and murdered over 1,200 Israeli civilians on Saturday morning. And when you read the Israeli news, and what we should be talking about, because this is really the big question that's out there today, is what's going to happen to Gaza. Israel doesn't know. Israelis don't know what is going to happen to Gaza. At the end of the day, let's say Israel destroys Hamas, which is not really possible because it's an idea. You can't destroy an idea, but you can destroy all of the military infrastructure. You can destroy the tunnels, the buildings, you can kill the people. Like, you could technically destroy Hamas, but at the end of the day, there you are with this massive piece of land called Gaza, relatively speaking, millions of people, and who's going to govern it? Is Israel going to govern it? No, I don't think so. But obviously, so many Israelis do want that because there's no way Israelis move back to those kibbutzes along the Gaza border unless they know that Gaza is secure.
Yeah.
And they thought Gaza was secure before October 7th, but that was a false reality. And so now the question amongst Israeli society, I hear, is who's going to govern Gaza? Is it Egypt, America, the EU, NATO?
There's only one solution, and that is that, and I'm not for or against this. I don't really have an opinion on what another country should do. Speaking from, sorry to cut you off, if I may, and then
please.
And the reason I told Lev earlier, I haven't slept in like 3 days. I'm in a nonstop podcast. So it's like, if I lose a thought, just get me back on track. But, speaking from a strictly military history, which was, one of my deep core undergrad subjects, and of course in my work as an intelligence analyst, it's just lots of that. Perforated states can't survive. You just cannot survive if your state is perforated, meaning you have territory within inside or almost inside your country that is not yours. It doesn't work. It's indefensible. Or a split state can't work. That's why, that's a real cause of the Civil War. You cannot break up the Union because it will fall. It will crumble. And really, if there's two solutions, no one gets it and everyone leaves, which obviously that's not reality, or one of them gets it and the other ones have to go. Because honestly, and that's, again, not my opinion, but I guess that's like military history strategic opinion, because at the end of the day, even if it enrages every country over there, let's not forget everything Israel does enrages every country over there, unless you're Jordan and you're getting, a good deal on water and power, for a long time, but which no one ever talks about as the exchange of, resources that people enjoy from Israel, even Arab states. But the point is, it's like you cannot. It's indefensible long term to have a perforated state. You just can't do it. So if it were me, as humanely, I guess, as possible, because the world opinion does count, I'd be investing in two things, like A, just taking it, and B, buying as much media as I could to make sure when I take it, even if I am humane, that the world knows I was, or as best as I can. I mean, let's face it, it's war, and we have an enemy that does actually hide behind civilians and puts tunnels under. And I've been to that area. Like, this is not something I saw on TikTok. It's like, this is real. Like, they make, and they're not the only ones. Everyone, all these like horrible organizations or terrorist groups, they always hide behind civilians. I mean, they always do, because, and then they have the cameras ready all the time. So in closing, I'll say this, and I did a lot of work in propaganda. I can't get into the details of what I did. Did a lot of work in propaganda on a major scale, possibly in that area. And I will say this, it's like, buyer beware, left, right, doesn't matter who you are. When you're reading a newspaper article or you're watching a video, if it opens up with the targeting of your emotions, don't believe it. Don't believe it, because they don't have facts, so they rely on feelings. If the story opens up saying, today in Gaza, this happened, link, 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 okay, that's one you want to read. I'm not saying believe it, but read it. But if they open up with, once again, babies were dying and mothers were crying and there was sadness all around, that's when you know it's a bullshit propaganda story, is playing on your emotions. Go ahead.
I love that. And talking about the right and the left, if it's a spectrum and Israel's response is on that spectrum, the far right, Israel could just drop an atomic bomb on Gaza and kill everyone overnight. It could wipe out Gaza if it wanted to, easily. Mm-hmm. But it's not doing that because Israel has values and morals and doesn't want to do that to the Palestinian people. The Israeli people are so hurt by seeing the videos of the Palestinian kids and babies being unfortunately injured and killed in Gaza. We hate seeing that. We're not celebrating that. We're hurt, just like everyone else is. But people don't believe that. People think that we're celebrating that, or we want that, and it's flawed.
The only problem, Benjamin, is that it seems that no matter how much proof you can give people of, oh, Israel's trying to help in this way, and it has these roof-knocking techniques that warn civilians before a building is going to be destroyed because Hamas is inside of it, none of that seems to matter. It almost seems, and this is going to sound very strange, but please bear with me, do you think that there are certain facets of our society that would actually start respecting Israel more if Israel becomes harder and if Israel becomes, let's say, more how do I say this the right way, more aggressive, where the aggression would be something that would be respected, while any lenience is actually seen as an insult, as strange as it is to say? I don't know. What do you think?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Do you mind it, Ben, if I go first?
Please.
Respectfully, I don't think that's the right question, or I guess the right question to ask. I would say it's constantly changing. I do want to point out that, like, the same people that organized ceasefire or stop the genocide, whatever it is, these are the same people that organized Ruth Sent Us. These are the same people that organized BLM. So you may have noticed these things pop up on demand. So the question to answer your question, Lev, I don't think it matters. I mean, we've already established the fact that most people are unaware of history, are led by social media. Really, the focus should be, if you know you're right, or even if you know you're wrong, because the wrong people are already doing this. No matter what message you want to convey, it's not about getting people to understand, because they will never understand unless they do the work.
Yeah.
And per Ben's awesome videos, he really goes into this in some of them. Like, you got to do the work. You got to work on yourself. You want to be better. You want to be sharp like a knife and have that brain. You got to do the work. You got to do the heavy lifting. Got to go to the mental gym, which is called a book. They're not going to do that, if they're hooked on social media. So in that case, what you have to do from a global propaganda standpoint, yes, you got to hit the academics with, good discussion. They're a very small part. You got to just do repetition in real estate. Like, you got to own the real estate. I think I think Israel is, and my wife is Jewish, and my brother-in-law has been in the IDF as well, and I'm a better shooter than he is, but that, but the thing is, like, there are people that will just never get it. Like, and this is like mental subversion. I'm sure we've all run into those very smart kids that are like 26, and you show them documents and you show them proof. You can show them a video and you're like, no, this guy actually kicked the puppy into the gutter. There he is. Here's a statement from him saying he kicked the puppy into the gutter. Here's an apology from him. Here's the puppy going into the gutter. But once they are propagandized, it doesn't matter.
But that's kind of my
convince
point, though.
them.
I just want to make sure you understand my point, that there have always been societies which were ruled by an autocrat who made sure that the society was extremely safe, not because people listened to reason, but because they knew that if they were to disobey the law, their head would meet an unfortunate dislocation from their body. And these are very violent, very guttural kind of situations to be in. But I think that culture-wise, there's all kinds of different cultures in the world, but there are also cultures that I genuinely believe respect that kind of mode, where they know that if you screw up, then it's going to be hell to pay, and they would look at the Europeans, the Americans being very friendly and cordial as weakness. They would see it like Osama bin Laden was talking about, who do you respect more, like the strong horse or the weak horse? So I don't know, Benjamin, any thoughts?
I was answering a different question. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
I knew exactly what you were asking, Lev, when you asked that question. And I think the Israeli military leadership sees its enemy, which is the group of 12 men sitting around the table in Qatar and Beirut and Gaza City, and thinking, how can we teach these men a lesson not to come after us? We're going to use force and make them learn the lesson the hard way rather than through diplomacy. We're going to punch them in the mouth. And that's what's happening in Israel today. And yes, Israel makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. But when you call Israel a terrorist state or they're committing war crimes, it all comes down to the facts. If we were to go to the International Criminal Court or any court and accuse Israel of committing a crime, show me the facts. And we're going to appeal it, whatever you say. So it's going to go to the appeals court, and we're going to have to review the facts even further. And everything has to be under the fine law of what happened and why was that justified or not. And I believe everything, or 99% of what Israel's doing in Gaza, would pass a judge's thumbs up or down under the laws of war.
But even more so, the things that are being followed in the laws of war, maybe not even that is enough to, unfortunately, earn the respect of 90% of the world, where even like the protests that we've seen here in the United States, and not just for what's going on right now with Israel and Palestine, but other, let's say, very left-leaning causes, it almost seems like whenever some social media figures come around and say, oh, I'm sorry that I was such a bigot, and so on and so forth, the piling on gets even stronger against that person. The moment you apologize, the moment you show any kind of weakness, it's almost like that they are able to smell it and engage even more, versus being of a position where you show so much force that they just like instinctually just like shut up and just like, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, and that kind of keeps the society functioning. But the other point that I wanted to get to as far as Syria, because I mentioned Syria before, this is something that's been on my mind for quite a while. I was looking about the things like with ISIS and things of that nature. When engaging who exactly the people are who are funding Hamas right now, it is Iran. You could say it's also China, Russia, but I could get into that a little bit later. But if we stick with Iran right now and look at the situation that occurred in Syria, the problem that I think some, again, people on the right have when it comes to the military-industrial complex in the United States, I'm not even going to talk about Israel at this point, but just like, let's say, military-industrial complex in general, international military-industrial complex, that if one goal of a lot of the neoconservatives has been to take the power of Iran away, and that's also been the goal of Saudi Arabia, here you have a situation in Syria where these rebels were being armed by the United States so as to fight against Syria, and then you have something like ISIS, which was also, from what I understand, taking over the oil wells, not the ones that were belonging to the Americans, but the ones that are those particular international entities, but taking over the oil wells that were belonging, if I'm not mistaken, to Assad. And that's the question when it comes to how much blame should be put. And believe me, I'm going to put a lot of blame on Putin for the refugee crisis, believe you me. But at the same time, how much blame should be put on the intent of the Americans to get rid of Assad so as to empower a lot of these rebels, so as to create, in a way, a vacuum that organizations like ISIS can fill, and in a way not really being, at least in the beginning, that keen on getting rid of them, because in a way you could say that the end goal is the same. For ISIS, it's to get rid of the Assad people, and for that international community is also to get rid of those Assad people. As horrible as it is to say something like that, would that not make sense from a purely Machiavellian perspective, that you would be on the sidelines and say, okay, like, let these rebel groups, so what if, like, some guns or some weapons go to ISIS, that's fine, as long as they're getting rid of Assad. And that's the thing that a lot of the people on the right now are complaining about regarding the military-industrial complex in general, regardless of whether we're talking about Israel or the United States. At least that is their theory. So I'm curious what you guys think about that, where there could possibly be the misconceptions. This is the general view that people have when it comes to what went on in Syria there, so let me know.
I'll take the mic real quick. I think
Okay.
people, one, I wish I knew more about the truth about what's going on in Syria, but I don't think people would want to remove Assad, because if you look at what happened in Afghanistan, by trying to create a democracy in a country that's not ours and spending trillions of dollars and decades of time, and what came out of it, you could call it a failure. I think the same thing would happen with trying to build a democracy in Syria. I don't think that's America's job anymore, and I think we've learned that lesson.
Well, I'm curious, Brian, you have a pretty wide lay of the land here. I recall General Wesley Clark back in the day talking about we're going to go into Iraq, we're going to go into Syria and all that. So what exactly...
I wouldn't use him as a source. So
no? Okay,
No,
that's interesting.
no.
I figured that is somebody who would be, like a general and all of that. Now I'm curious. So number one, I'm curious why Wesley Clark is a bad source. And number two, what do you think of this general opinion that people who are very black-pilled about the U.S. military have, where they talk about how, well, we've kind of, looked the other way to allow something like ISIS to grow because we wanted to get rid of Assad and all that stuff?
Well, we've been getting rid of Assad supposedly forever. And I would say when you're looking at these things, you just look at the geography and look at who has the stated goal of ruling the planet. Okay, who has ever come out and said, that's us? Do you know who that is? That's China. Look at the world today. Every country in the world is on fire except for China. Look at the protests that are like pro-Hamas and just the chaotic protests, some that are in every direction. And their main voice there is Jewish Voice for Peace, which you don't have to be Jewish to be a part of, which is run by self-admitted neo-Marxists. Okay, if you look at their board. Neo-Marxists talking about who's right and who's wrong, and then framing it in a religious context. They're neo-Marxists by their very nature tend to lean atheist. And then if you want a connection to China, look at Code Pink. Code Pink, who's not behind them, but a big funder of a lot of these protests, right? Not just this one, the Ruth sent us protests, those Roe v. Wade ones, BLM, so many. Okay, it's Code Pink. Jody Evans, her husband was actually in the New York Times. They did an investigation that was actually pretty good, and I hate the New York Times, but this one I didn't find a lot of flaws in it. Jody Evans, the founder of Code Pink, happens to be her husband, and I'll call it up for you.
I have a guy here to pick up.
Go soon too, Lev. Hey, you know what? Why don't we do a 2B? But let me just say, I'll send you the links. Check out Code Pink, and if you
wait,
Ben,
I don't even know if Ben has to go. Wait, Ben, do you have to go?
You don't have to go for like 5 minutes.
Yes. All right. So
because I have someone waiting for me, but I would say this. Don't look at the conflict on the ground. You see what I mean? It's like, that's like looking at the blister without wondering how the blister got there. what I would say is, like, look at who is always wanting to broker peace in all of these conflicts. It's always ultimately, even Ukraine, the Chinese. Okay. And then look at their China dream, which they call it China rejuvenation. You know what China rejuvenation is? We are the global hegemon. That's how they see rejuvenation. Okay. And they've got an axe to grind against, first and foremost against the Japanese and then us. And they cannot achieve what they want to achieve without us out of the way. So let me come around to the point. If you look at what's going on with not the conflict on the ground, because I think when you look at, like, especially what's going on with, Hamas and Israel, if you focus on the history of it and everything, and you're not actually there, or you're Israeli, or you don't actually have a vested interest in it, you are going to learn important things, but they don't matter. It's not actionable intelligence. I think we have to look at the things that fan those flames. They'll figure it out one way or another. Either someone's going to die or someone's going to own it all. They're going to figure it out. They'll get into the biblical reasons. Those don't matter in the national or international or public conversation, because most people don't even know what those are. And so what I'm saying is, look at who's fanning the flames, and it's always the same organizations. Always, and they all exist on actionnetwork.org or opencollective.com. And they just pop up, these violent protests, where you can already have the TikTok videos made for you and the hashtags are prefabbed. And they, for as little as $10 a month. And these things just pop up. I mean, Lev, weren't you curious how Jewish Voice for Peace got so many people deployed with matching t-shirts and matching signs all to the same area overnight? I put the link in your private chat. It's because there's an app for that, for lack of a better phrase. And I first discovered this when I was looking at Ruth Sent Us. And you remember the red cloaks after the Roe v. Wade decision. They popped up out of nowhere. And I was actually hired by a law firm to look into that. And I looked into that and I was like, wait a minute. What they are is they're just CRMs, like customer relationship management systems, Salesforce. But you get it all in there. You get your contacts in there. If you don't have protesters or contacts, you can put out a call for them, meaning they'll get you some. You can send your art. You can actually upload your art from Google Drive. You can link it to your little account, and it will get to the local Kinkos. Get your T-shirts there as well.
Kinkos.
Get your hashtags. Get ideas for themes. Get ideas for signs. Like, hey, I know you want to go with ceasefire for humanity, but how about just stop genocide? We think that one polls better. They'll give you that. There's media context. You could actually go to any of these and get a demo, and they show you this stuff. And if you go to like actionnetwork.org right now, just scroll down, you'll see Black Lives Matters right there. If you go to Jewish Voice for Peace, you'll find their actions in there. Now,
but are they only doing left stuff or both left and right stuff?
No, they're only doing left stuff.
So here's an idea. What if somebody on the right organizes a protest at the offices of this organization and it kind of like starts, shedding some light on what's going on here?
Well, I was on Ask Dr. Drew, and we're talking about the same thing, because he said, well, why doesn't the right do something like this? And I said, I'll take it. And this was me saying it. I said, I'll take it further. It's like, why don't we just use the tool that exists? I mean, if it works out well, let's do it. I mean, at a minimum for counter protests. But you know what, Lev? I do want to do an experiment, and I want to film it every step of the way and record the screen every step of the way. And I want to pick some obscure things so no one gets hurt or anything like that, of like, save the ass-headed bullfinch caterpillar that only exists in, like, I don't know where, Montana, and get people to really get into this and see how many people we can actually get to get out there and protest for this, because some evil, I don't know, gas company, I guess, wants to kill their natural habitat. I bet I could get it going. And that's funny, but what's scary about this is when you zoom all the way out on the world and you look at what's happening, this almost seems to me like there's a forced religious war going on here, whereas you have, for instance, Jewish Voice for Peace saying that Israel's bad, and then they always say, but not Jewish people, just so we're clear, right? But then if you look at their funding, they have no, or contributors or partnerships, they have no Jewish partnerships. So though they say they care about their Jewish people, the Jewish Voice for Peace, how come all of their partnerships are with everyone except for any Jewish organizations? Now, granted, they have the network of rabbis and all that, but what I'm saying is when you see the funding coming in, it's not that. So I guess what I'm saying is what I see with terrorism, what I've seen with terrorism throughout the years that I've been fighting terrorism and, literally fighting terrorism. And I mean, my whole career was the war on terror. And so it seems to me like terrorist groups are just moved here, moved there. It's like, oh, we need a conflict here. We need a conflict here. Oh, we need to drive down land deals here. Oh, you know what? China needs a dam over here. Let's have a terrorist conflict. We'll bring in the UN. And oh, by the way, in the rebuilding process, we'll dam up the Yangtze River. I mean, that's how it works. And that's how terrorist groups are used all the time. Because I'm sorry, anyone that doesn't see that, I'm not saying Hamas was used. They're obviously gleeful participants in this massacre, but there's a reason why they wore GoPros and wanted to be so public about it.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And it goes beyond anything that people are talking about. People are like, well, they just did that because they wanted the world to see that they were fighting back. It's like, not if you see what's on those videos. And then people will say, oh, well, they did that just because they're mindless savages. No, yeah, they're mindless in the moment, but certainly not. No, it's because there was a reaction that someone wanted the world to have. And I think that reaction is chaos, because I think the ultimate goal of that is to complete that access to the Mediterranean by the Chinese Communist Party with the help of Lebanon and Syria.
We have a super chat, by the way, from great Derek of Myth Vision, which is an amazing podcast. I hope to do a collab with you and Derek, possibly talking about like ancient religions and stuff. He is really, really cool. And he sends $5 with the following message. Does Brian know Master Sergeant Michael J. Lambert from Fort Bragg, North Carolina? He was 7th Group and moved to USA SOC. He's retired now. That's his father. That's why he was asking if you...
Tell him he can send me a picture, because honestly, I get that. So 7th Group, I know. If he said 82nd, I was going to say hell no. But he said 7th Group, so that's good. Lambert, it rings a bell. I can kind of vaguely recall a guy who was like in shape but thinner with like darkish hair. Everyone has short hair, so he can connect with me. On Twitter or something. I'll DM him back or whatever.
And we are going to be concluding.
I'm better visually than name.
We are going to be concluding with the super chats almost right now, because I know, Brian, you got to go into a sleep for like 10 years probably after all of this, after all of these podcast appearances. And Benjamin, I'm really, really thankful that you got to come in and talk with us.
Good conversation.
Yes,
to talk to you again. Definitely.
Yeah, and I would love to learn more about Centurion Intelligence Partners.
Oh, you got it, man. Definitely.
Yeah. Now, I want to make sure that we touch on this, because it is important to me. I was talking about Russia and Putin before. When it comes to China, I couldn't agree more with Brian, but Russia also seemed to have played a role in what's been going on with Israel, because keep in mind, Bibi Netanyahu was very, very close, very friendly with Vladimir Putin for a very long time, and when it came to what occurred recently, Russia's, for example, it was recruiting Palestinians in the Lebanese refugee camps to fight for Russia and Ukraine, but also the hand gliders that the Palestinians were using there, that Hamas was using, it really resembles like these Poisk 06 MSN models, which was utilized by the Russian Guard. Now, adding on top of all this, as far as the motivation
Can you explain that, Lev? I'm not familiar with that.
It's just the model of the glider.
Okay.
That's what I mean. That was the same model that was used by the Russian Guard. But the reason why I'm saying this is that when it comes to the lack of intelligence on the part of Israel, I'm not sure if it was in lack of intelligence so much as an executive decision made by Bibi at the time not to pursue something, possibly because, and this is just my interpretation of it, take it as you will, he was given a reassurance by Putin that, hey, we're going to look into it, everything is fine, all these rumors that you're hearing about, it's no big deal. And I really do think, like, after Russian leaders met with the leaders of Hamas several times already, Russia's been showing very clearly where exactly it stands. It took Putin like 7 days to get back to Netanyahu, and he did not have the same opinion of Israel as a lot of the other Western world leaders did as far as this horrible tragedy that occurred. So, I don't know. Like, to me, it seems like Russia's playing a bigger role in all of this. And again, I want to kind of like fight against the whole, Russia gate. That's why we're not going to talk about Russia anymore thing. Like, if something is fishy here, I'm going to pursue it. And I think that Russia's also playing a pretty big role here, especially keeping in mind the amount of Russian people that are in Israel. And I wonder about the loyalty of some of them when it comes to being associated with the Kremlin still, while having positions within Israeli intelligence, within Mossad, meanwhile reporting back to the Kremlin. So I don't know. This is all like a pretty big deal for me as far as the amount of power that Russia has here. But I don't know. Ben and Brian, what do you think? And then we're going to go to Super Chats.
Ben, that's all you, man.
I've heard a rumor from multiple sources stating that on October 7th, the infrastructure of Israel's security was hacked. It wasn't just that everyone was sleeping. Israel has a high technology enabled fence on the Gaza border. It has cameras watching the Gaza border, and all of that was hacked. And they believe the various people who've told me, 3 different people have told me that Russia was the force that hijacked Israel's tech infrastructure, and there was no way that Hamas was able to do it at that scale, because obviously Israel has an incredible cybersecurity capability. So if that's true that Russia was the one who helped Hamas attack Israel on October 7th, 2023, then that really changes the dynamics. If that's true, but that's just a rumor.
Well, I could definitely see how they can benefit here as far as being a stooge of China. Like, Brian, you were talking about China wanting to take over. I couldn't agree more, but I see Russia and China...
They said it. Yeah.
I see Russia and China as being one and the same at the end of the day, since they might as well be one entity. That's how much Russia is scared of China and how much they're depending on China, and that's why I just see them as a puppet state of China at the end of the day.
I'll put it this way, and then I get to it. Like, Russia is China's dog. Okay, they don't want to be, but they are. And this started back when China started really just going into Siberia and grabbing timber and then grabbing all the resources. And it was actually the USSR that warned the United States against arming China, and we didn't believe them. So I'll save that for another conversation.
Very interesting. Yeah.
What I am saying is that and I agree with what Ben's saying. I've got a note, Lev, and this is in no way like an attack on you or anything like that. I don't mean this. So I mean this respectfully, but I do notice that the question, the way you ask it, you say it's like there's no room for anything, but it has to be Russia. And I would say I would rather answer that as if you said, who do you think it could be? Because when I think technology of that scale, Russia's hacking ability really was denigrated in 2016 when so many of these things, especially coming out of Macedonia, which is a big hub because of bandwidth, they lost a lot of that when they became the bad guy, and then, they got attacked by a lot of international hacker groups. And so they were severely diminished, but they also don't have the bandwidth, the actual data bandwidth that China and or Belt and Road countries would have. So when I look at that, I hear you saying, do you think Russia this, or did Russia do this? I'm thinking, I don't think it was Russia at all. I think you have to look at this as, again, who could do that? I mean, who could hack it? Who can hack our ports? Who can hack our security? Who has the biggest contracts to make security camera systems, advanced systems, big enough to do an entire province in China with facial recognition? I'm pretty sure that would be China. And the other thing I see too is when I see the videos, I've got to say, as not the GoPros, those are those are horrific, but when I see the aerial shot that we've all seen where they drop the grenade, which actually looks like an M80, to be honest with you. I've never lit a fuse on a grenade. Maybe you can enlighten me on that one, Ben. But you notice there's a fuse on that thing. Mm-hmm. It's a homemade. It just looks weird. But what I'm saying is, we only see that one, and that's supposed to demonstrate that that's how they took out the comms. I mean, obviously, we were meant to see that, so people say, "Oh, they took out the comms because they dropped, a giant firecracker into the telecom system." But that wouldn't necessarily take out the comms. That's a lot of people forget. You'd have to literally take out hubs and sometimes satellites to wipe out this, even on security cameras. And a lot of these security cameras don't even run on radio waves. They run on electric currents that are part of a infrastructure. So that's Hollywood, in my opinion. So to answer your question, I would say, shit, man, I forgot the original question.
Okay. No, I could give you one counter, which is neither saying Russians in Russia. It's like neither saying Russians in Russia, and it's neither saying the Chinese. Here's my theory, and before we go to Super Chat's ban, I would love for you to answer what you think about this. What I think has been going on with the hacking, these are Russians who are embedded as fifth columnists within the Israeli army, within the Israeli intelligence. Because for a long time, there's been a lot of Putinist loyalists like Roman Abramovich, like Vitalshev, Moshe Kantor, that made Israel their home. And the question of loyalty starts to come up here as far as people who are well-trained within the IDF, within Mossad, who know those zones inside and out, while still maintaining loyalty towards the Kremlin. Those people could do a lot of damage, and that's what I possibly think has been going on here. So not Russians within Russia, but people who are kind of like traitors that are on the inside, and Netanyahu being very confused as far as his relationship with Putin all this time. I think that may have also played a role in the horrible things that we've seen. But I don't know, you've got the final word on that, and then we're going to go to Super Chats.
If that were true, I'd be shocked. I highly doubt that. It does make sense because there are a lot of Russians in Israel, and you could see some of them breaking ranks and fighting for Russia, but I would just be truly shocked if that were true. But in today's world, you never know.
You never know, indeed. So, guys,
we're going to add really quickly on
go
that.
For it.
If you're going to have people betraying or embedding, you wouldn't have something that organized and well coordinated that was already proven to have been rehearsed in Lebanon. I mean, it's just too well coordinated. It's just I just don't think it'd be that organized. You might have a couple internal terror attacks or something like that, but that was full spectrum dominance.
Well, you were saying originally how smart Putin is and how he's like the KGB mastermind and all that. So I'd assume that there would be some.
That is a cheap trick, my friend.
Yeah, if you meet a lot of the Russian-speaking people in Israel, they're all very pro-Israel. They're grateful that Israel gave them a place to immigrate to. So the ethos of the Russian-speaking people in Israel is gratitude and a love for the country. So I think your theory that Russian soldiers who are working in Israeli intelligence were actually helping Hamas. I think that's wrong.
I hope
I agree.
that I am mistaken about that theory. I've just seen a lot of these, at least from the oligarchs' perspective, a lot of these very pro-Putinist oligarchs also, putting a lot of money into Israel, and that does kind of make me question where exactly at least those oligarchs' loyalties are at the end of the day, since they're so dependent on Putin, and I just kind of like stretch that outwards into Mossad and the general thing, because, you got double agents, triple agents, and all kinds of things. But anyway, we're going to be going into Super Chat. Oh, and by the way, Brian, I still maintain that Putin is a dumbass, and he was made a dumbass through gradual degeneration that would happen with any dictator when you just get like butt kissers around you telling you what you want to hear. So I see him as
I would
somebody.
maintain
Yes.
that the wise warrior always assumes his enemy is smarter than he is.
True. All right, that's I will take that. All right, on to super chats. Here we go. The great and powerful Glass Cake, 15 pounds. My friend from Great Britain. Putin is speak of the devil. Putin is incredibly smart. His agenda is to lord over people and make them retarded. Please understand this, Brian. Also, I had to add a space between re and tarded just so Google would let me yap.
I mean, is that a haiku? I really enjoyed it. It was very melodic.
No,
and all
yeah.
due respect.
Yeah. No, I guess his point is
what
that
the question is.
No, I guess his point is that his agenda, Putin's agenda, is to make everybody like really, really stupid who was under him. And it kind of makes sense with somebody like Stalin, too, because if you look at what occurred during Stalin's reign, the people who...
I mean, that's the communist and dictatorial way. I mean, that's pretty standard.
They wanted to, but not just on the people, like the people who were supposed to be like in charge of things. Stalin ended up trusting Khrushchev the most because Khrushchev pretended to be an idiot.
Right.
And that's why in the end Khrushchev ended up winning, while anybody who showed like the slightest indication of competence was very quickly weeded out because Stalin knew, and rightfully so, that these people are going to, if they're smart enough within that kind of system, not like the classically liberal, flexible system that we have, under that kind of top-down system, he knew that those people are going to get into power and they're going to betray him if they're too smart.
Lev, I want to say something. What was that person's name? Because I do apologize. I think I was a bit insulting, and I don't mean it. So I'm going to give you...
No, it's cool. Glass Cake.
Glass Cake. Not you. For the glass cake?
Yeah, Glass Cake, yeah.
I want to give him something in return to show that I do mean it. Fun fact. The U.S. intelligence agencies and ecosystem kind of has the same problem. I always used to call it Survivor Island, where you can't be too good. Can't catch too many fish. Got to catch some. You got to be right in the middle. Otherwise, they eliminate you on either end. Isn't that scary?
That is pretty scary. Yeah, absolutely. So I think these are all the super chats right now, but I really appreciate you guys doing this. And now it's time to promote all the things that you guys are working on. So let's start with Benjamin Sklar. What do you got in the works? You also do law stuff. You do these great motivational videos. Where can people find more info about you and subscribe to your podcast?
So what I'm currently working on is trying to build my business as a lawyer. I am a corporate lawyer in New York, focused on helping startups and companies raise money. So if you are a CEO, founder, and are looking to raise equity, I'm your guy.
There we go. And as far as the podcast goes?
As far as the podcast goes, I'm the host of Hacking the Hustle. It's a podcast you can find on all the different podcasts.
It's a great title.
Thank you. Why do you say that, Brian?
It's a great title. I mean, it's just a great title. Hacking the Hustle. It says everything the podcast is about within the title. It's perfect.
Thank you. And I also have 3 episodes into a new podcast called Solving the Conflict. So very relevant to today's conversation.
Absolutely. And what about Instagram, Twitter? Like, where are you the most active?
You can find me on all the different platforms with my name, Benjamin Sklar, or Benji Sklar. My friends call me Benji, J-I. So reach out, find me there, send me a message.
Excellent. And Brian, what are you working on now, brother?
I mean, these days I am working on dailyclout.io. I co-host with my good friend JJ Carroll. We co-host
Great dude.
something called Great. Thank you. He's top notch. It's called Unrestricted Invasion, and then my own column is called Mostly Peaceful, going beyond the headlines to get to the real news. But I also wanted to say Brian O'Shea on Substack, investigate everything. And what I do like to do is I always say, like, attack the tower, not the archer. So what I do try to focus on is, okay, not what's happening, but why it's happening. Because that's really what you have to target to get your freedom back, is the manipulators, not the manipulated. Granted, you got to protect yourself from the manipulated, but it's the people moving the pieces that you got to pay attention to. And you can also check out, because Ben brought it up earlier, I'm COO of a private intelligence company called CenturionIntelligence.com. And Ben, I can actually talk to you offline, and we could talk about maybe connecting you with some people. So
Yeah.
Be happy to hear that.
This is what Break the Rules does. We bring together these people. We are like, Break the Rules is like the connector inside of the brain with various synapses. All the synapses are just connected on all the most important things that are going on in the world, and the right people are meeting each other through this platform of BTR, but it would not be able to be that way without your support. And here's how you can support BTR. Patreon.com/Break the Rules. It's super easy to remember. I don't even know how that title was available, but it was. So patreon.com/Break the Rules. I have the link right over here in the chat. For all you guys who are watching this, go there right now. Patreon, it's going to be of an immense help. The $20 tier is great. So is the $5 one. For the $5, you get the MP3s of the episodes after they come out. For the $20 one, you are also going to get discounts, if not completely free events that I'm going to be doing in New York City, where you're going to be able to meet up with various people who I know, possibly some of the people that are on the show. Wink, wink, hint, hint. And same thing with like the online onlys for the people who are not in New York City and hopefully eventually will come over. But a good way to kind of like get to know you guys and meet very interesting people as well. So that's what's going down in that tier of the Patreon. And for $50, guys, you are going to get my assistance with starting a podcast. You like this microphone? You like this nice lighting over here that I set up? This whole way of advertising? OBS, all of this secret knowledge of the universe can be yours with the $50 Patreon tier. I say like for several months, just to kind of like establish trust. But afterwards, I am going to be at your disposal to guide you on how to create the perfect podcast, find an audience, all that good stuff. I've been through the ringer. I know what I'm talking about. Brian, you can definitely confirm that. And with that said, go to Discord as well. For all the very online people who love all the Discord forums, Break the Rules has its own Discord, and if you know what's good for you, you're going to sign up there and join the cult. There we go, guys. Follow me on Twitter at LevPo, LEVPO. Oh, and I completely forgot. LevsLens.com, LevsLens.com, LevsLens.com. That is my Substack, so go there right now. Here is the link. It's also levpo.substack.com. It's the same thing. It goes to the same place. Read my Hassan Piker article, Hassan Piker, the Sultan of Entropy. It talks a lot about the kind of stuff that we were talking about today as well. And also, I am going to be coming out tomorrow with a new article, which is going to be about Malay versus Trump versus several other people like Geert Wilders, for instance, and just like comparing all of these coming, based and red-pilled world leaders and what exactly we have in store from them. So anyway, guys, that's all I got to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, big thank you to Benjamin Sklar, Brian O'Shea. You guys are family people. I really appreciate you making the time to actually be here and speak with this crazy dude with the long hair. So thank you guys so much. I hope to see you guys in person very soon as well. Wishing everybody the best. Have a good night. Mwah!